Chapter 322. By Jinmu sneered. Prince Zhang, do you think you've won just like that? You're wrong. Our battle has just begun. You better be careful next time. Don't fall into my hands. After hearing Bai Jinmu's words, Zhang Meng didn't care. He just sighed. Bai Jinmu, trust me. From now on, I'll count to 10. If you don't say your last words, then I'm sorry. I'll take it that you have nothing to say and you'll disappear from this world forever. Haha. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Bai Jinmu laughed out loud. It was as if he had heard the most unbelievable thing in the world. Zhang Meng wasn't moved. He opened his mouth and started counting. 1, 2, 3, haha. Bai Jinmu was still laughing. He didn't believe that when Prince Zhang counted to 10, he would have a way to save Sun Xinjing. Bai Jinmu was very confident in himself. So what if Prince Zhang's martial arts skills were high? Could he save Sun Xinjing from his fingers? Impossible. His hand was placed on Sun Xinjing's throat. If he wanted to, Sun Xinjing would be dead in a breath's time. As for young Master Zhang, he wanted to rescue Sun Xinjing within a breath's time. This was a little too unbelievable. The more Bai Jinmu thought about it, the more he wanted to laugh. He couldn't help but laugh out loud again. Haha. 7, 8, 9. When Zhang Meng counted to 9, he suddenly sighed. Why is my heart so soft? Although I know that you're an evil person, I can't bear to do it. Bai Jinmu, I'll give you one more chance. Tell me your regrets, and I'll help you complete them. After saying this, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. Bai Jinmu, say your last words. This can be considered your final care for your family. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Bai Jinmu's gaze suddenly turned cold as he shouted, All right, then let me tell you. If I become the branch master of the South County branch, my family will become the 5th elder of the Bai family in the South County. Can you do it? Can you make them the 5th elder of the Bai family in the South County? Upon hearing this, Zhang Meng's expression turned grave. Bai Jinmu, are these your last words? Bai Jinmu laughed out loud. So what if I am? Do you think you can do it? Ha 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 ha. Looking at Bai Jinmu, who was laughing loudly, Zhang Meng sighed and said loudly, Bai Jinmu, are your last words to let your family become the 5th elder of the South County branch? Bai Jinmu sneered. Do you think you can do it? Zhang Meng said solemnly, Bai Jinmu, after you leave, I'll go to your house. If your family isn't as bad as you, I can fulfill your wish. At this point, Zhang Meng sighed and said with a bitter smile, Bai Jinmu, do you know that you're very lucky? You're the first person I've made disappear. In order to not make me feel bad, I'll try my best to fulfill your wish. At this point, Zhang Meng raised his hand and waved at Bai Jinmu. I hope you'll be a good person in your next life. Goodbye. Seeing Zhang Meng waving goodbye to him, Bai Jinmu's heart turned cold. Looking at Zhang Meng's regretful face, he suddenly believed Zhang Meng's words. He actually wanted to beg for mercy, but it was too late. When Zhang Meng's hand fell, Bai Jinmu had already disappeared. Sun Xinjing, who was restrained by Bai Jinmu, slowly fell to the ground without any external support. There was no other sound except for the sound of the wind blowing and the rustling of the leaves. Everyone looked at the place where Bai Jinmu disappeared in disbelief. They wanted to figure out what was going on, but they found that their minds were blank. How could Bai Jinmu disappear? LV Wenkong, Yi Xian, and the others were shocked. However, Tang Jinan and Lu Huarong were different from them. At this moment, Tang Jinan and Lu Huarong had large beads of sweat on their foreheads. Their bodies were already soaked in cold sweat, and their faces were frighteningly pale. If one looked carefully, they could see that the two of them were trembling uncontrollably. After a while, everyone was awakened by Sun Xinjing's violent coughing. LV Wenkong, Yi Xian, and the others rushed to their master to check on his condition. Only then did Tang Jinan and Lu Huarong react. They understood the situation they were facing now. Subconsciously, they ran away, wanting to get out of this dangerous place. Tang Jinan, Lu Huarong, if you don't want to disappear, hurry up and get back here. The two of them didn't take more than 2 steps before they heard Prince Zhang's voice. When they heard this voice, Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong subconsciously stopped in their tracks. They didn't even dare to move. They really didn't dare to move. Bai Jianmu was a living example. Bai Jianmu's martial arts skills were much higher than theirs. However, he disappeared just like that, let alone the two of them. After calling out to Tang Jianan and Lu Huarong, Zhang Meng slowly walked in front of Sun Xinjing. At this moment, the uncomfortable feeling in Sun Xinjing's throat had long disappeared. All that was left in his heart was shock. Prince Zhang was very powerful. Sun Xinjing had already guessed it through the divination technique just now. However, he didn't expect him to be so powerful. Sun Xinjing was very clear about Bai Jianmu's martial arts skills. He could be said to be the #1 person in the South County branch. But so what? Prince Zhang didn't make a move and Bai Jianmu disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Seeing Prince Zhang walking over, Sun Xinjing calmed down and waved to the disciples in front of him. All of you leave first. I have something to talk to Prince Zhang alone. After hearing Sun Xinjing's words, LV Wenkong, Yi Xian, and the others quickly cupped their hands and retreated to the side. Zhang Meng squatted down in front of Sun Xinjing and asked with a smile, "Old Sun, how are you feeling? Are you okay?" Hearing Zhang Meng's question, Sun Xinjing nodded. "I'm fine." At this point, Sun Xinjing subconsciously looked around and asked in a low voice, "Prince Zhang, where did Bai Jianmu go?" When Zhang Meng heard this, he spread out his hands. "No, he disappeared?" Sun Xinjing's eyes widened. "Did he really disappear?" Zhang Meng nodded. His expression suddenly became a little ugly. He said with a crying smile, "To be precise, Bai Jianmu has turned into ashes and disappeared into the air." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, although it was within Sun Xinjing's expectations, he couldn't help but gasp. He had never heard of a martial arts skill that could turn a person into ashes. This was really turning a person into ashes, not seriously injuring or crippling them, but really turning them into ashes and disappearing into thin air. Looking at Sun Xinjing's ugly expression, Zhang Meng sighed. "Old Sun, believe it or not, this is the first time I've turned someone into ashes. I don't feel good." Chapter 323. After listening to Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xinjing nodded silently and then said, "Prince Zhang, Bai Jianmu's sin is useful. You have done a good deed, so don't blame yourself too much." Zhang Meng nodded and suddenly said with a smile, "Old man Sun, now that the matter has been resolved and the blueprint has been found, you should fulfill the conditions you promised me." Sun Xinjing heard this and quickly nodded. "Of course, this old man will naturally fulfill all the things I promised you." Sun Xinjing naturally did not dare to neglect people like Zhang Meng. This was a fierce person who could make people disappear. If he was unhappy, it would not be difficult for him to make his old bones disappear. Thinking of himself disappearing into the air, Sun Xinjing could not help but shiver. Zhang Meng stretched out 2 fingers and said with a smile, "First, lend me 4 tijingangs. This is not fake, right?" Sun Xinjing quickly nodded. Seeing Sun Xinjing nod, Zhang Meng continued, "Second, I want to take Zhang Leji away, and let him build the auction house for me forever. You won't object to this, right?" Hearing Zhang Meng's second condition, Sun Xinjing hesitated for a moment. At first, when Zhang Meng said that he wanted to take Zhang Leji away, Sun Xinjing was furious. At that time, he had already determined that Yi Xian and Zhang Leji were the ones who stole the blueprint. They were already traitors in Sun Xinjing's eyes, so there was nothing to feel sorry about. But now it was different. Yi Xian and Zhang Leji were not the ones who stole the blueprint. Now that Zhang Meng wanted to take Zhang Leji away, Sun Xinjing was a little reluctant. "Prince Zhang, can you change the condition?" Zhang Meng shook his head and turned to look at Sun Xinjing. He smiled and asked, "Old man Sun, are you going back on your word?" Seeing Zhang Meng looking over, Sun Xinjing suddenly thought of Bai Jianmu who had disappeared. He wanted to refuse, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Zhang Meng patted Sun Xinjing's shoulder and said earnestly, "As a person, you have to be trustworthy. I found the blueprint for you, and I even got rid of the person who stole it. To be honest, this isn't much for you to thank me. Old man's son, don't you agree?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xinjing gritted his teeth and nodded. "All right, I agree." Hearing Sun Xinjing's answer, Zhang Meng nodded in satisfaction. "That's more like it. If you don't keep your word, then what's the point of being a person?" Sun Xinjing asked doubtfully, "Prince Zhang, do you really want to build the auction house you mentioned?" Zhang Meng smiled. "Do you think I'm lying to you?" Sun Xinjing nodded with difficulty. Zhang Meng laughed and patted Sun Xinjing's shoulder. "Don't worry, I will build the largest auction house in the world in the future. My plan will definitely succeed." Since the matter had been resolved, Zhang Meng did not want to waste any more time here. He took Sun Xinjing to see the 4 Taijin gangs, Zhang Lizhi and Zhang Qiuming, and left the South County branch and walked down the mountain. When the group arrived at the foot of the mountain, Zhang Meng suddenly turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and said, "Prince Zhang, do you know the Bai family in South County?" After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Zhang Qiuming was stunned. He immediately reacted and asked in surprise, "Are you really going to complete Bai Jianmu's last wish?" Zhang Meng sighed. "I don't know either. Forget it, let's talk about it in the future. Let's go to Kikiamen to take a look first. It'll save us the trouble of taking a detour." Zhang Qiuming nodded. "Brother Meng, actually, you don't have to pay attention to what Bai Jianmu and the others said. His character is so bad, so his family definitely isn't any better. Don't pay attention to him." Zhang Meng nodded silently and said in a deep voice, "All right, let's go to Kikiamen first and ask them to make the nightmare cloak for us." Kikiamen was indeed a small sect. Standing in front of Kikiamen's door, Zhang Meng felt a little emotional. Kikiamen was located in the suburbs of South County. Kikiamen's entire territory was a slightly larger courtyard. If it were not for the words Kikiamen hanging on the door, Zhang Meng would never have thought that this was actually a sect. For big men stood in front of the door, carefully examining the people who came in and out. Zhang Qiuming nodded to Zhang Meng and quickly stepped forward. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "We're here to see sect leader Sunday. Please help me pass on the message." One of the men heard Zhang Qiuming's words and waved his hand. "Young master, something big has happened in our sect. The sect leader has said that he won't see outsiders." Zhang Qiuming heard this and pointed at a man who had just walked out. He asked, "What's the matter with him?" The big man explained, "This person customized his equipment a long time ago. He's here to collect it now." Zhang Qiuming heard this and hurriedly cupped his hands again. "Brother, can you make an exception? We do have something important to discuss with the sect leader." The big man heard this and frowned. "What's the matter?" This time, before Zhang Qiuming could speak, Zhang Meng had already stepped forward and said with a smile, "We're here to help you fight against the Tiangongmen." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, the big man's eyes lit up. He said happily, "Really?" Zhang Meng nodded. "Really?" The big man heard this and was instantly overjoyed. He quickly cupped his hands and said, "Then please wait for a moment. I'll go and pass on the message." As he spoke, the big man was about to walk into the sect when he was stopped by another middle-aged man. The middle-aged man turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked with a smile, "Brother, do you know how to make equipment?" Zhang Meng shook his head and said frankly, "I don't." When the middle-aged man heard this, he frowned. "Then may I ask, since you don't know how to make equipment, how can you help us?" After hearing the middle-aged man's words, Zhang Meng was stunned. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. When the middle-aged man saw this, he understood and hurriedly said apologetically, Brother, it's not that I don't want to help you pass on the message, but the sect leader is currently preparing for the competition. Please don't disturb the sect leader. If this person spoke rudely to Zhang Meng could use this opportunity to slap him and barge in. However, since the man was so polite, Zhang Meng couldn't force his way in. He could only smile and say, Brother, although I don't know how to make equipment, how do you know that I can't help your sect leader? After hearing Zhang Meng's question, the middle-aged man's face turned serious. Brother, now that the competition between us and the Tiangongmen is imminent, we really don't want to distract the sect leader and cause him to lose this competition. At this point, the middle-aged man suddenly sighed. Little brother, this competition is very important. It concerns the life and death of our sect. Therefore, I hope that little brother won't take offense. Don't cause trouble for the sect leader. Chapter 324. Just as they were talking, a middle-aged woman walked out of the door. When she saw Zhang Meng and the others, she couldn't help but frown. Little brother, if you want to make equipment, come back in a few days. Our sect doesn't have time to make equipment for others. Before coming to Qiqiao sect, Zhang Meng had Zhang Liji and the other four Tai. Jingong gong 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 gong. In gong 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 in gongs. At this moment, only Zhang Qiuming and the four Zhang family servants had come with him. When Zhang Meng heard the middle-aged woman's words, he quickly said, We came here to ask you to make equipment for us. On the other hand, we want to see if there's anything we can help you with. When the middle-aged woman heard this, she narrowed her eyes and sneered. Little brother, thank you for your kindness. However, we will deal with our sect's matters. Please leave as soon as possible. After saying this, the middle-aged woman turned to the four men and said loudly, Master doesn't have time to meet outsiders. You guys watch carefully. No one is allowed to enter. Do you understand? When they heard the middle-aged woman's words, the four men hurriedly responded. The middle-aged woman turned to look at Zhang Meng. Little brother, please leave. After saying this, the middle-aged woman hurriedly left. Looking at the middle-aged woman's back, Zhang Meng was puzzled. When he said that he was here to help them, the men guarding the door didn't believe him, but they were somewhat moved and grateful. However, the middle-aged woman's attitude was completely different from the four men's. From the middle-aged woman's tone, it was clear that regardless of whether Zhang Meng could help them or not, she wouldn't let Zhang Meng help them. Looking at the middle-aged woman walking away, Zhang Meng was stunned for a moment. He then turned to the man who had spoken to him and asked with a smile, Brother, may I know who the person who spoke just now is? The man looked left and right, and seeing that there was no one else around, he said in a low voice, This is our sect master's eldest disciple, Shingyun. Eldest disciple, Shingyun. Zhang Meng silently repeated this name in his heart, but he was even more puzzled. Since they were Kikiamen's eldest disciples, why would they not want outsiders to help them? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng looked at the man and asked again, Brother, are you going to compete with the Tiangongmen in the arena? Many people knew about this, so there was no need to hide it. The man nodded calmly. That's right. The competition will be held on the 8th day of the next month. Zhang Meng asked doubtfully, Brother, I heard that the Tiangongmen are very strong. Are you confident in winning this competition? The man was stunned when he heard this, and then he waved his hand. I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know anything. After hearing the man's reply, Zhang Meng understood what was going on. If Kikiamen was confident in winning this competition, the man would have proudly told Zhang Meng and let Zhang Meng know how strong Kikiamen was. However, the man did not say that. This meant that Kikiamen was not confident in defeating the Tiangongmen. Zhang Meng could understand Shin Guyun's attitude if she was confident in defeating the Tiangongman. That was her arrogance and confidence. However, Kikyaman was not confident in defeating the Tiangongman, so why did she still have such an attitude? Zhang Meng really couldn't see through this. After thinking for a while, Zhang Meng could only think of Shin Guyun's attitude as her looking down on him. Seeing that the gatekeeper did not let them in, Zhang Qiuming came to Zhang Meng's side and whispered, "The fierce brothers, since they don't let us in, what should we do? Why don't we find a hotel in Nanjun and stay there first? We'll come back to find them after their matter is settled." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Meng waved his hand. "Wait a moment." As he spoke, Zhang Meng turned his head to look at the gatekeeper and asked with a smile, "By the way, brother, I only know that Kikyaman and the Tiangongman are competing, but I really don't know how they are going to compete. Can you tell me more about it?" The gatekeeper thought about it and felt that it was not a big deal, so he nodded and said slowly, "The competition is very simple. The method of the competition is very simple. Since it's equipment, of course, it's a competition of defensive power. Whoever makes equipment with higher defensive power wins." After hearing this person's introduction, Zhang Meng was stunned and asked with some doubt, "I heard that Kikyaman only makes some cotton and leather armor, while the Tiangongmen make most of their equipment with metal. If they compete in this way, wouldn't the Tianji sect be at a disadvantage? They probably don't have much chance of winning." Although Zhang Meng did not know how to make equipment, he was very clear that in terms of defense, the defense of leather armor was not on the same level as the defense of metal armor. In other words, the two could not be compared. The purpose of leather armor was defense, and the other reason was that it was light. It could be worn by people who wanted to increase their agility so that it would not affect their movement speed. On the other hand, the main purpose of metal armor was defense. The higher the defense, the better the equipment. Logically speaking, there was no way these two types of equipment could be compared. The advantage of leather armor was that it was light. The advantage of metal armor was that it had high defense. If these two types of equipment were only competing in defense, then the result of this competition was obvious. Zhang Meng asked hesitantly, "Isn't it a little unfair to compete in defense between these two types of equipment?" The person waved his hand. "Of course it's not that simple. On the premise of competing in defense, we also have to compete in weight. The two pieces of equipment have to be the same weight, and then we'll compete in defense." At this point, the person scratched his head and continued, "If I remember correctly, as long as the weight of the two pieces of equipment does not exceed 15 kilograms, they can participate in the competition." 15 kilograms? Zhang Meng calculated in his mind. If he were to compare an armor made of 15 kilograms of iron with a piece of leather armor, which would be stronger? However, Zhang Meng quickly realized that no matter how he compared the two, an armor made of 15 kilograms of iron, even if it was just a thin layer, would definitely have a stronger defense than a piece of leather armor. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng raised his head and looked at the man. He asked curiously, "If we were to compete like this, wouldn't you lose without a doubt?" As soon as Zhang Meng finished speaking, before the man in front of him could answer, a woman's voice came from the door. "Who was the one who said that leather armor must lose to equipment made of metal?" Chapter 325. Hearing this voice, Zhang Meng hurriedly looked up and saw an 18 or 19-year-old girl dressed in light yellow standing at the door, looking at him with a cold smile. Before Zhang Meng could reply, the gatekeepers had already stepped forward to greet her. "Greetings, Mississippi," the yellow-robed girl said to them with some displeasure. "Why aren't you guarding this place properly? Why are you talking nonsense with an outsider?" "It's one of our men who hurriedly said, 'Miss, this young master wants to come here to make equipment. After hearing about what happened to our sect, he asked for help.'" This subordinate explained to him a little. Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl turned to look at Zhang Meng. After sizing him up, she asked, "You know how to make equipment?" Hearing the yellow-robed girl's question, Zhang Meng shook his head. "No." The yellow-robed girl asked curiously, "Since you don't know how to make equipment, how can you help us?" Zhang Meng smiled. "There are many ways to help. For example, spiritual support is also a kind of help." Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl was stunned for a moment. She asked with some astonishment, "Could it be that you want to support us spiritually?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "Of course, I can't just support you spiritually. If you agree to one of my conditions, I may support you in other ways." Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl asked doubtfully, "How can you support us in other ways?" Zhang Meng said, "I haven't thought of it yet." The yellow-robed girl waved her hand. "All right then, we'll talk about it when you think of it." Saying this, the yellow-robed girl turned to look at the gatekeepers. "I'm going to the city. You guys look after this place." After saying this, the yellow-robed girl waved her hand at the two men behind her. "Let's go." After saying this, the yellow-robed girl turned to leave. Seeing that they were not letting him in, Zhang Meng hurriedly stopped the yellow-robed girl and said with a smile, "Mississippi, since Miss wants to go to the city, and we can't get in anyway, why don't we accompany Miss and go to the city together? Is that okay?" The yellow-robed girl pondered for a moment. Then, she shook her head. "This place isn't far from the city. You can go straight along this road. It won't take long for you to reach the city." Zhang Meng smiled and said, "Actually, I wanted to find someone in Kikyaman to make the black feather cloak for me. Unfortunately, something like this happened here. That's why I want to accompany you. I also want to know the details of this matter and see if there's anything I can help with. That way you can quickly send people to make the black feather cloak for me." "Black feather cape?" Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl's eyes lit up. "Do you have a nightmare eagle's feather?" Zhang Meng nodded. "Yes, there are many more. That's why I want to ask you to send someone to help me make the black feather cloak." When the yellow-robed girl heard this, she sized him up again. "Do you really have the nightmare eagle's feather?" Zhang Meng nodded again. Only then did the yellow-robed girl wave her hand. "All right, let's go now." The group of people left the Kikyaman's gate and walked along the main road in front of the gate towards the South County City. This place was not far from the South County City. Standing in front of the Kikyaman's gate, they could actually see the tall city walls of the South County City. Therefore, they did not need to ride horses or take a carriage to go to the South County City. It was much more convenient to walk. Before they could walk far, Zhang Meng quickly walked forward and walked side by side with the yellow-robed girl. "Miss, are you confident in the competition with the Tiangongmen?" The yellow-robed girl shook her head. "It's hard to say. If we can find the diamond monster's skin, we still have a glimmer of hope. However, we've been searching for so long, but we still haven't found the diamond monster's skin." Zhang Meng asked, "Why do we have to find the diamond monster's skin in order to have a chance of winning?" The yellow-robed girl pondered for a moment before slowly saying, "Diamond monsters live on a stone mountain 300 miles to the south. Because they have been drilling into the stone for many years, their defense is quite astonishing. Ordinary swords and sabers can't do anything to them. If we use their skin to make equipment, their defense will definitely be very strong." At this point, the yellow-robed girl suddenly sighed. "But I go to the city every day, but I don't find any diamond monster's skin." After hearing the yellow-robed girl's words, Zhang Meng nodded. When forging leather armor, the main defensive power was dependent on the material itself. If the material used to forge leather armor was not good, no matter how capable you were, you would not be able to increase the defensive power of this leather armor. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng asked with some doubt, "Don't tell me that other than finding the diamond monster's skin, you don't have any other way?" The yellow-robed girl shook her head. "Now that we've found the skin of a wasteland bear, my mother is considering if there's any other way to increase the defensive power of this leather armor." While the two of them were talking, they had already walked into South County City. The inside of the city was completely different from the outside. As soon as they entered the city, the number of pedestrians on the road suddenly increased by several times, and all kinds of noisy voices rang in Zhang Meng's ears. Not long after they walked on the street, the yellow-robed girl led them into a small alley. At the end of the alley, there was an equipment store. The yellow-robed girl went straight to the equipment store. As soon as they walked into the store, Zhang Meng saw the yellow-robed girl hurrying to the counter. After asking at the counter, she walked back with a face full of disappointment. Zhang Meng hurriedly went forward and asked, "You don't have it?" The yellow-robed girl shook her head. "No." Just like that, the yellow-robed girl led everyone to a few more equipment stores, but they still found nothing. Looking at the yellow-robed girl with a frown, Zhang Meng could not help but ask, "Hey, why haven't we found the skin of a diamond monster after walking for so long?" This time, without waiting for the yellow-robed girl to answer, Zhang Qiuming, who had been silent at the back, quickly walked to Zhang Meng's side and said in a low voice, "Brother Meng, you might not know this, but other than their skin, the diamond monsters do not have any other uses. Furthermore, the diamond monsters stay in the rock every day and refuse to come out. Even if we wanted to find them, it would not be easy, much less capture them. If you hunt a diamond monster, its skin can be sold for about 1,000 gold coins. However, diamond monsters only appear on the Stone Mountain. Even if you go to the Stone Mountain, you might not even see the shadow of a diamond monster for a month. However, if you use this month to hunt wild bears, you will definitely earn more money than this. Therefore, slowly, not many people are willing to hunt diamond monsters." At this point, Zhang Qiuming paused for a moment before continuing. "In addition, there's another biggest problem. The defense of diamond monsters is quite amazing. Whether it's a knife or a palm strike, it won't cause much damage to it. As long as you don't kill it in one blow, it will drill into the rock." Chapter 326. Zhang Qiuming continued, "If you can't kill or capture a diamond monster when you see it, the diamond monster will immediately burrow into a rock. When that happens, you won't be able to find it again. Not only that, but the diamond monster's attack power is also very strong. It has a sharp horn on its forehead that is extremely hard. If you're hit by this horn, no matter how strong your equipment is, it will be smashed to pieces. This has a lot to do with why very few people hunt diamond monsters. If the equipment that everyone worked so hard to obtain is easily damaged by a diamond, wouldn't the gains not make up for the losses?" As soon as Zhang Qiuming finished speaking, the yellow-shirted girl beside him sighed softly. "The main reason is that there are too few diamond monsters. You just said that you might not be able to see its shadow for a month, and that's still an understatement. It's also possible that you won't be able to find its shadow for a year. These are all possibilities." After hearing the two's words, Zhang Meng nodded. He also understood why they couldn't find the diamond monster's skin. Diamond monsters were very rare, and it was usually very difficult to see them. Diamond monster's defense was very strong. Even if you managed to see its shadow with great difficulty, you wouldn't be able to hurt it. However, as long as you couldn't hurt it, it would burrow into a rock in a very short period of time. When that happened, it would be almost impossible to see it again. The diamond monster's attack power was also very shocking. Although the sharp horn on its forehead wasn't invincible, its damage was quite high. As long as ordinary armor encountered the sharp horn on its forehead, it was very likely that it would be reduced to scrap. After understanding this, Zhang Meng also sighed. Needless to say, even he probably didn't want to hunt diamond monsters after hearing that they were so difficult to deal with. It was too much of a waste. Since diamond monsters were so difficult to hunt, Zhang Meng felt that there wasn't much hope to continue searching. Seeing that it was almost noon, he turned to look at the yellow-shirted girl and said with a smile, "We can't rush this matter. This matter can't be rushed. We've also walked a long way. Why don't we find a place to have a meal first, take a rest, and think of a way while we're at it." The yellow-robed girl heard this and nodded. She turned her head and saw a restaurant not far away. She stretched out her hand and pointed. "Let's eat there." Since it was called a restaurant, it naturally wouldn't be on the first floor. In order to be quieter, the group of people ordered their food and went directly to the second floor. They found a table by the window and sat down at 2 tables. The yellow-robed girl's 2 subordinates and Zhang Qiuming's 4 subordinates sat at the same table. Zhang Meng, the yellow-robed girl, and Zhang Qiuming sat at the same table. Just as the 3 of them sat down and Zhang Meng was about to speak, they heard a burst of unbridled laughter coming from the stairs. "Where is she? I clearly saw that girl go into this restaurant. How did she disappear?" Along with the laughter, a group of people walked up the stairs. At the front was a young man in his 20s, wearing a blue robe. After this person came up, from the stairs behind them, 7 or 8 burly Han people came up one after another. The blue-robed man went up to the second floor and swept his gaze across the hall. His gaze then fell on the yellow-robed girl. Soon after, he quickly walked up to the table where the 3 of them were seated. Without asking anything, he directly sat beside the yellow-robed girl. "Ling family's little sister, Big Brother saw you on the street just now. I was just about to greet you when you went into the restaurant. Took me a long time to find you." The yellow-robed girl frowned and said in a low voice, "Han Yuchao, do you need something?" Hearing this, Han Yuchao laughed even more. "Little sister, don't tell me I don't need something from you?" The yellow-robed girl said angrily, "Who's your little sister? Get out of here." In the face of the yellow-robed girl's angry rebuke, Han Yuchao did not care. After laughing a few times, he slowly said, "Little sister, why do you say that? We'll be a family soon. You're treating me like an outsider." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, the yellow-robed girl suddenly slammed the table and said angrily, "Han Yuchao, you better make yourself clear. What do you mean we'll be a family soon? Do I know you? Are we close? I'm telling you, get out of here quickly. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." Seeing this, Han Yuchao touched his chin and said indifferently, "Why not a family? In a few days our 2 sects will compete. Your Kikiaman sect will belong to our Tiangongman. At that time, won't we be a family?" After hearing Han Yuchao's words, the yellow-robed girl became angry. She suddenly stood up, picked up the teacup on the table, and threw it at Han Yuchao. The yellow-robed girl and Han Yuchao were not far away. The teacup she threw was also very fast. Just as the teacup was about to hit Han Yuchao's face, a hand suddenly appeared in front of him and caught the teacup. After the hand caught the teacup, it slowly put it on the table and then shrank back. Seeing that the teacup she threw was caught, the yellow-robed girl was stunned. After she reacted, she went to take the teacup in front of Zhang Meng, but she was stopped by Zhang Meng. "If you have something to say it nicely. Why get angry?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Han Yuchao suddenly laughed. The person behind him was an expert he had spent a lot of money and his father's connections to invite. If such an expert could not even catch a teacup, wouldn't it be a joke? Seeing Zhang Meng stop the yellow-robed girl, Han Yuchao knew in his heart that they were afraid. "Sister Lu, this little brother is right. If you have something to say it nicely. Why get angry? Ha ha." After being stopped by Zhang Meng, the yellow-robed girl's anger dissipated a little. She turned to look at Han Yuchao and said coldly, "Han Yuchao, we have nothing to say. Please leave here." Hearing this, Han Yuchao spread out his hands. "Sister Lu, this is your fault. This is a restaurant. I can sit wherever I want. No one can stop me." Seeing that Han Yuchao was being unreasonable, the yellow-robed girl took a deep breath and turned to Zhang Meng and Zhang Qiuming and said, "Let's change tables and let him eat here." This time, before Zhang Meng could answer, Han Yuchao suddenly slammed the table. "No one is allowed to leave. Eat at this table." The yellow-robed girl sneered and turned to leave. Who knew that just as she turned around, a long sword blocked her way. Without young Master Han's permission, no one is allowed to leave. Zhang Meng saw the person who said this clearly. This person was the one who caught the teacup just now. This person was in his 20s. Although his appearance was not bad, his face was expressionless and looked very cold. The yellow-robed girl's two subordinates had already come behind the yellow-robed girl when the two were arguing. Now that they saw this person make a move, they did not hesitate. Chapter 327. When the two subordinates of the yellow-robed girl saw that someone was attacking them, they immediately swung their fists at the young man's back in an attempt to repel him. However, the young man only turned slightly and waved his hand, waving it in front of their eyes. In the next moment, the two of them were sent flying, crashing onto the table in front of them, smashing it into smithereens. Seeing that the situation had escalated, and that someone had smashed the table, the innkeeper hurriedly rushed up and asked in a trembling voice, What are you doing?" Han Yuchao waved his hand at the innkeeper and said with a sneer, "Go calculate how much you should pay. I'll accompany you in a moment." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, the innkeeper turned pale with fright. Even if Han Yuchao was willing to pay for his table, so what? How much was a table worth? The key was that the customers on the second floor would all run away when they saw a fight. Even if there were people who wanted to eat, they would definitely hide far away when they saw a fight. This kind of loss would be the greatest. The innkeeper wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Han Yuchao and said, "Young master, please be magnanimous. Don't fight anymore. If you continue fighting, the customers of this small store will all be driven away by you." Han Yuchao smiled and pointed at the yellow-robed girl. "It's not that I want to fight. I just want to have a meal with this young lady, but this young lady doesn't want to give me face. If you can persuade this young lady to have a meal with me, then naturally this fight won't be necessary." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, the innkeeper immediately turned to look at the yellow-robed girl with a bitter face and cupped his hands. "Young lady, please be magnanimous. Sit down and have a meal. If you continue to fight, then this business of mats can't be continued." Seeing the yellow-robed girl's face turn red with anger and seeing Han Yuchao's complacent look, Zhang Meng suddenly turned to look at the yellow-robed girl and said softly, "Young lady, let's sit down and talk. Let's listen to what this young master has to say." The yellow-robed girl turned to look at Zhang Meng and then looked at the pitiful innkeeper. She coldly snorted, "Today you beat up two of my subordinates. Are you going to let it go just like that?" When Zhang Meng heard this, he smiled. "Of course not." Speaking of this, Zhang Meng turned to look at Han Yuchao and said with a smile, "Your men beat them up so badly. How much do you want to pay?" After listening to Zhang Meng's words, Han Yuchao laughed out loud. "Compensate? What compensation? Their skills are not as good as others. How can they blame others?" When Zhang Meng heard this, the smile on his face didn't fade. He just nodded and said with a smile, "So that's how it is. As long as your skills are not as good as others, it's useless to fight, right?" After listening to Zhang Meng's words, Han Yuchao was stunned. He subconsciously glanced at the young man and immediately nodded proudly. "Of course, I'm not as good as him. Of course, I'll fight for nothing." Han Yuchao had the right to be arrogant. This young man was a third-generation disciple of the Heaven's Sword sect, and his name was Xin Fei. The Heaven's Sword sect was incomparably powerful, and the sect master's strength had reached the peak of the Hotian realm. In this world, there were no more than 5 people who could be his opponent, and Xin Fei was one of the best of the third-generation disciples of the Heaven's Sword sect. His ranking was also quite high. If it weren't for the relationship between Han Yuchao's father and the Heaven's Sword sect, the Heaven's Sword sect would never be willing to be a guard for someone else. With such a guard, Han Yuchao didn't believe that there were many people in the South County City who could be a match for Xin Fei. Thinking of this, Han Yuchao sneered. "Young master, what is your relationship with Kikyaman?" Zhang Meng shook his head. It's nothing. I just came here to ask Kikiaman for help. Han Yuchao nodded. Suddenly, his eyes turned cold as he stared at Zhang Meng. He said coldly, "Young master, do you know who I am?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "I know." Han Yuchao sneered. "My name is Han Yuchao. My father is the vice-sect master of the Tiangongmen. Do you know this time?" Zhang Meng nodded. "I know." Seeing that Zhang Meng knew his identity, Han Yuchao retracted his gaze and said indifferently, "Friend, if you leave now, you will be my friend. If there's anything, you can look for me." At this point, Han Yuchao paused for a moment. Then, he turned his head to look at Zhang Meng and said coldly, "If you don't leave, you will be the enemy of the Tiangongmen in the future. Do you understand?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "Young Master Han, I feel that the person who needs to leave is not me, but you." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, the yellow-robed girl, who originally had an ugly expression, suddenly laughed. "Han Yuchao, leave quickly. No one here welcomes you." Han Yuchao ignored the yellow-robed girl and stared at Zhang Meng. He asked somewhat coldly, "You really don't want to leave?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "I haven't finished my business. Why should I leave? You, on the other hand, no one at this table welcomes you. Why do you still want to stay?" At this moment, Zhang Qiuming suddenly stood up and cupped his hands towards Han Yuchao. He smiled and said, "This one is Zhang Qiuming from Cyanwood City. If I have offended him just now, please forgive me. For my sake, today's matter will be forgotten. In the future, this one will definitely pay him a visit to thank him." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Han Yuchao suddenly slammed the table and angrily said, "Cyanwood City's Zhang Qiuming, who do you think you are? You dare to meddle in this old man's business? Do you believe that I won't make it so that you won't be able to return to Cyanwood City?" Hearing Han Yuchao's words, Zhang Qiuming's expression couldn't help but change. Zhang Qiuming's father was the city lord of Cyanwood City, the boss of Cyanwood City. No matter how many cities there were in the South Province, the boss of a city definitely wouldn't be ordinary. Zhang Qiuming naturally knew about the Tiangongmen. This sect was extremely powerful and spread throughout the entire Anwu country. The Tiangongmen's sect master Zhu Jinshi was even more powerful. Not only did he rely on crafting equipment, but his martial arts were also terrifyingly high. Even if he encountered the Heavenly Sword sect's sect master, he would be able to last 100 moves without being defeated. In the Anwu country, the Heavenly Sword sect's sect master rarely had a match. Being able to last 100 moves without being defeated was already quite an honor. Moreover, Zhu Jinshi's strength wasn't just limited to martial arts. His skill in crafting equipment was even rarer. Many equipment stores and auction houses would send people to guard the Tiangongmen's entrance. Their goal was to be the first to know Zhu Jinshi's situation. Once Zhu Jinshi crafted equipment, everyone would buy it at all costs. In the past few years, Zhu Jinshi had rarely crafted equipment. Now, he mainly cultivated his martial arts and wanted to improve his martial arts to the next level. It was because of this that the equipment he crafted was even rarer. As long as it was spread that he had crafted equipment, it would immediately cause a commotion. Chapter 328. The deputy leader of the Tiangongmen, Han Qinyun, was Han Yuchao's younger brother. Although there was still a gap between him and Zhu Jinshi, Han Qinyun was still the second most powerful person among the Tiangongmen. He had high attainments in martial arts and equipment crafting. It was also because of this that Zhang Qiuming knew how powerful Han Yuchao's father was. That was why he wanted to minimize this matter and not offend Han Yuchao. However, this did not mean that Zhang Qiuming was afraid of Han Yuchao. Although Zhang Qiuming was not afraid of Han Yuchao, he really did not want to offend Han Yuchao. In Anwu country, the most popular equipment was made by the Tiangongmen. As a martial artist, No one was willing to offend the Heaven's Craftsman faction because a good piece of equipment was very important to a martial artist. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a life-saving asset. It was because of this that Zhang Qiuming really did not want to offend Han Yuchao. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Zhang Qiuming's face turned red with anger. He thought about the consequences if he lost his temper, so he gritted his teeth and endured it. Although Zhang Qiuming endured it, his subordinates definitely could not. If they did, then what use would Zhang Qiuming have for them? After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Zhang Qiuming's subordinates immediately flew into a rage. The leader of the team, Wang Qi, roared angrily, "Kid, how dare you speak so arrogantly and be so rude to our young master?" As Wang Qi spoke, he gave the other three people a look. The four of them stood up at the same time and surrounded Han Yuchao. When Zhang Qiuming saw this, he quickly waved his hands at the four people. Then, he turned to look at Han Yuchao and cupped his fists again. "Young Master Han, I think we should just let this matter go. It'll save us from hurting our relationship." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Han Yuchao glanced sideways at Zhang Qiuming's subordinates and sneered. "Do you think that you can threaten me with these useless subordinates of yours?" Zhang Qiuming smiled. "I wouldn't dare." Han Yuchao sneered. Suddenly, his face turned cold and he shouted at the young man, "Shen Fei, teach them a lesson. Let them know how powerful I am so that they won't bark like dogs." When Shen Fei heard this, he was stunned and frowned. He thought about it and slowly walked in front of Zhang Qiuming's four subordinates, and said in a low voice, "All of you should leave." Wang sneered. "Why?" Shen Fei slowly raised his sword. "With this sword." Just as Wang Qi was about to say something, Zhang Qiuming said first, "Wang Qi, you leave first." After listening to Zhang Qiuming's instructions, Wang Qi and the others retreated to the side. However, their gazes were still fixed on this side. When Han Yuchao saw this, he sneered. "Young master, why did you ask your subordinates to leave? Are you scared?" Haha, looking at Han Yuchao who was laughing, the yellow-robed girl couldn't hold it in anymore. She slammed the table and said angrily, "Han Yuchao, that's enough. What do you want for you to leave?" Hearing the yellow-robed girl's words, Han Yuchao immediately stopped smiling. "Sister, don't you understand my feelings?" When the yellow-robed girl heard this, she suppressed the anger in her heart and said calmly, "Han Yuchao, I've told you many times. It's impossible between us. You should give up. Now, please leave quickly. I want to eat with my friends." When he heard the yellow-robed girl rejecting him again, Han Yuchao's face changed. The last few times, it was because his subordinates were not good enough that they had to leave helplessly. However, this time, with Shen Fei's help, Han Yuchao wanted to solve this problem once and for all. Thinking of this, Han Yuchao clasped his hands at the yellow-robed girl. "Sister, why are you so stubborn? You're Kikyaman's daughter and I'm the Tiangongman's son. We're so well matched. If the two of us get married, Tiangongman and Kikyaman will be one family. When that time comes, won't it?" Before Han Yuchao could finish, the yellow-robed girl interrupted him. "Han Yuchao, how many times have I told you? It's impossible between us." When he heard the yellow-robed girl rejecting him again, Han Yuchao suddenly became angry. He slammed the table and shouted, "Leng Yelyo, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Today I'll see what you're capable of." Speaking of this, Han Yuchao's face suddenly revealed a trace of a sinister smile. He stood up abruptly and waved his hand at the people behind him. "Invite Miss Ling back first." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Ling Yelyo's face turned red with anger. He said angrily, "Han Yuchao, you dare?" Han Yuchao sneered, "See if I dare or not, brothers." This time, before Han Yuchao could finish, one of his subordinates suddenly came in front of him and whispered a few words in his ear. After hearing this subordinate's words, Han Yuchao nodded. He turned his head and looked deeply at Ling Yelyo. Then, he waved his hand at the subordinate behind him. "Let's go." After saying this, Han Yuchao turned and left. In the blink of an eye, Han Yuchao and his subordinates left the restaurant and the restaurant regained its peace. Looking at the backs of Han Yuchao and the others, Zhang Qiuming sighed softly. He knew that this matter was definitely not over. The reason why Han Yuchao left was definitely because he had other tricks up his sleeves. Seeing Zhang Qiuming sigh, Zhang Meng could not help but laugh. "What's wrong, Prince Zhang? Don't you want them to leave?" Zhang Qiuming shook his head and said with a serious expression, "No, I'm guessing that Han Yuchao didn't really want to leave. There must be another reason." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Ling Yelyo said apologetically, "I'm really sorry. Because of my matter, you guys were implicated." At this point, Ling Yelyo paused for a moment before continuing. "I think you guys might as well leave now and avoid trouble." When Zhang Qiuming heard this, he hurriedly asked, "If we leave, what about you?" Ling Yelyo shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Han Yuchao won't dare to do anything to me. After all, the city lord is still the most important in South County City." After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng smiled and waved his hand. "Let's not talk about that for now. By the way, why hasn't our food been served yet?" Zhang Qiuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. "The Fierce brothers, why are you still thinking about eating?" Zhang Meng turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and asked in confusion, "Are we not eating?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Zhang Qiuming shook his head again. "The Fierce brothers, do you know about Tiangongmen?" Zhang Meng nodded. "I remember you told me that Tiangongmen make metal equipment. Is there something wrong with that?" Zhang Qiuming sighed. "Then do you know how powerful Tiangongmen are?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "You didn't tell me. How would I know?" Chapter 329. Zhang Qiuming sighed. "The Fierce brothers, did you know that almost half of the equipment in Anwu country is made by the Tiangongmen?" After hearing Zhang Qiuming's words, Zhang Meng was also stunned. He asked with some surprise, "Really? Are the Tiangongmen that powerful?" Seeing Zhang Meng's shocked expression, Zhang Qiuming sighed inwardly. He knew from the beginning that Zhang Meng didn't understand anything, not even the most basic of common sense. That was why he explained it to Zhang Meng in order to let him know just how powerful the Tianji sect was. Sure enough, just as Zhang Qiuming had guessed, Zhang Meng was also shocked when he heard the news. Zhang Qiuming sighed. "The Fierce brothers, now you understand why I don't want to clash with them." Zhang Meng nodded. "I understand." After saying this, Zhang Meng turned his head to look at Ling Yelyo and asked doubtfully, "Since the Tiangongmen are so powerful and your Kikyaman dares to go against them, then your Tianqiao sect must be very powerful too, right?" Ling Yelyo shook his head. "We don't have many people in Kikyaman, and we don't have much power." After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng asked curiously, "If you don't have much power, then why do you still want to go against the Tiangongmen?" After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Ling Yelyo shook his head sadly. "This isn't because we want to go against them. The Tiangongmen want Kikyamen to submit to them. That's why they came up with this plan." After hearing this, Zhang Meng finally understood. "I see." At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. "The Tiangongmen want your Kikyamen to submit to them. Isn't that a good thing? After all, your sects are too small and don't have enough resources. Just like today, you guys needed a diamond monster. If it was in Tiangongmen, you wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Isn't that a good thing?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo shook his head. "Actually, the disadvantages of belonging to the Tiangongmen outweigh the advantages. First of all, they would lose their freedom. Then, no matter what they wanted to do, they would have to listen to the Tiangongmen. Secondly, every sect had its own reason for existing. In other words, the reason why every sect existed was because of the inheritance of some kind of consummate skill that could support the sect. If Kikyaman submitted to the Tiangongmen, Kikyaman's secret would no longer be a secret. The Tiangongmen want us to submit to them mainly because they want to know Kikiaman's secret. After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng nodded. It's because of this secret that you guys don't want to submit to the Tiangongmen? Ling Yelyo nodded. The Tiangongmen are strong because they have relied on this method from the beginning to absorb some of the smaller sects and obtain the secrets of these sections. That's how they grew bit by bit. Zhang Meng sighed. The leader of the Tiangongmen is really a talent. At this point, Zhang Meng turned his head to look at Ling Yelyo and asked with a smile that was not a smile, "Miss Ling, do you think the Tiangongmen want to annex Kikiaman has anything to do with you?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo was startled for a moment before shaking his head. "I don't know." Looking at Ling Yelyo's beautiful face, Zhang Meng was sure that this matter definitely had something to do with her. After all, Han Yuchao's father was the vice leader. This was very important. Zhang Qiuming sighed. The leader of the Tiangongmen, Zhu Jinshi, is not only skilled in making equipment, but his martial arts are also top-notch. He definitely has a place among the top 100 experts in Anwu country. Hearing Zhang Qiuming say that the leader of the Tianji sect, Zhu Jinshi, was actually so powerful, Zhang Meng's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He turned to look at Zhang Qiuming and asked, "By the way, how's Fang Tianji's martial arts?" Zhang Qiuming shook his head. "I don't know. No one has seen Fang Tianji fight, but most people guessed that Fang Tianji's martial arts are unfathomable. He's definitely among the top 100 experts. As for how high his martial arts are, no one knows." After hearing Zhang Qiuming's answer, Zhang Meng nodded. Ever since he went to the South County branch, he had been somewhat puzzled. The South County branch of the Tianji sect could be considered quite powerful. However, a small Bai Jinmu could actually become the #1 expert of the South County branch. Could the entire Tianji sect have a foothold in the martial arts world with such strength? If everyone had martial arts like Sun Xinjing and the others, then the South County branch would have no secret. As long as someone had strong martial arts, they could beat the entire South County branch into submission. What secrets would there be? Thinking of this, Zhang Meng turned to look at Ling Yelyo and asked, "Then your Kikiaman sect leader should be very strong in martial arts, right?" Ling Yelyo nodded slightly. "He should be all right." Zhang Qiuming saw that Zhang Meng already knew how powerful the Tianji sect was, so he asked again, "The fierce brothers, what should we do next? Should we wait here or go back first?" Zhang Meng thought for a moment before replying, "How about this? You take Zhang Liji and the 4 Tai Jingangs back first. I'll stay here and wait. When I'm done here, I'll go back to find you." Zhang Qiuming's expression changed when he heard this. He asked in a low voice, "The fierce brothers, you want to?" Before Zhang Qiuming could finish, Zhang Meng waved his hand and interrupted him. "Prince Zhang, you guys go back first. After all, it's not a good idea to let Zhang Liji hide in the mountains." Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing, "Don't worry, I can take care of things here." Zhang Qiuming said anxiously, but Zhang Meng said, "No buts. I'll be careful. As long as the Tiangongmen don't provoke me, I won't provoke them." After hearing Zhang Meng's words and remembering that even the great Earth Black Bear didn't dare to provoke Zhang Meng, Zhang Qiuming felt slightly relieved. "If that's the case, I'll go back with Zhang Liji first. However, you have to be careful too. The Tiangongmen are too strong. If you can avoid offending them, try not to." Zhang Meng nodded. "Don't worry, I won't provoke them." Hearing their conversation, Ling Yelyo hesitated for a moment before saying, "I think you should go back with them. We'll have a competition on the 8th of next month. In such a short time, we won't be able to make equipment for you." Speaking up to this point, Ling Yelyo sighed again. "If we can win this competition, I'll craft equipment for you." Zhang Meng smiled and waved his hand. "It's okay. Even if I go back, I won't have anything to do. I'll stay here and see how things go. Maybe I can help you guys." Chapter 330. After the three of them finished eating, Zhang Qiuming left. In order to find the skin of the diamond monster, Leng Yelyo and Zhang Meng continued to stay in South County City and went to the remaining equipment shops to try their luck. Unfortunately, their luck was not good. They went to a few more equipment shops in a row, but they did not find what they were looking for. South County City was too big, and there were many equipment shops. The two of them searched until it was almost evening, but they still could not find what they were looking for. Seeing that it was already late, Leng Yelyo sighed helplessly. Let's go to another shop and go back. We'll come back tomorrow. Zhang Meng heard this and asked with a smile, Do you come here every day to look for it? Leng Yelyo nodded. In order to win this competition, we can only continue to look. At this point, Leng Yelyo sighed. Only by finding the skin of the diamond monster will we have a glimmer of hope to win this competition. Hearing Leng Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng suddenly asked, You mean, even if you find the skin of the diamond monster, you might not be able to win this competition, right? Leng Yelyo nodded silently. After a while, he said slowly, That's indeed the case. However, as far as we know, the skin of a diamond monster is the most likely to be obtained. Other than that, we have no other choice. As they spoke, the two of them had already arrived in front of an equipment shop. Leng Yelyo pushed open the door of the equipment shop and walked in quickly. Zhang Meng thought about the meaning of Leng Yelyo's words and walked into the equipment shop. This equipment shop was the same as other shop. In the middle of the room was a counter. This counter was very long and divided the entire room into two. The only connection was a small door on the side of the counter, which became the passage between the front and back rooms. Behind the counter, there was a row of shelves with all kinds of equipment on them. Behind the counter, there was a thin middle-aged man sitting. At the counter behind him, there was a young man busy wiping the equipment on the shelves. When the middle-aged man saw someone enter, his eyes lit up. He quickly stood up and asked with a smile, Miss Leng, you're here? What would you like to order today? Leng Yelyo waved his hand. Qian Laoqi, I'm only asking you now. Do you have any diamond monster skin? After hearing Leng Yelyo's words, Qian Laoqi shook his head. No, not for the time being. Speaking up to this point, Qian Laoqi pondered for a moment before slowly saying, Today, I heard someone say that Li Jin's group seems to have hunted a diamond monster. I don't know if it's true or not. After hearing Qian Laoqi's words, Leng Yelyo's eyes lit up. He quickly asked, Really? Did Li Jin and the others really hunt a diamond-grade monster? Qian Laoqi shook his head and said, I don't know. I just heard it from one of Li Jin's people. It was just a random sentence. I don't know if it's true or not. When Leng Yelyo heard this, he lowered his head and pondered for a moment. He no longer paid attention to Qian Laoqi and turned to look at Zhang Meng. Let's go find Li Jin and see if this is true or not. As he spoke, Leng Yelyo quickly walked out of the door. Seeing Leng Yelyo leave in a hurry, Zhang Meng could only smile bitterly and chase after him. After the two of them left Qian Laoqi's shop, Leng Yelyo quickly walked towards the west of the city. Seeing this, Zhang Meng hurriedly chased after him. He walked side by side with Leng Yelyo and asked in a low voice, Who is Li Jin? Leng Yelyo replied as he walked, Li Jin lives in the west of the city. His martial arts are strong and he usually hunts for a living. He also has 7 or 8 brothers under him. Their martial arts are not bad. They can be considered a professional hunting team. Since they had a goal, there was no need to walk anymore. The two of them left the alley and called for a carriage. They sat in the carriage and sped towards the west of the city. Looking at the shops that flew past them, Zhang Meng turned to look at Leng Yelyo and asked softly, If you don't have the skin of the diamond monster, does that mean that you won't be able to defeat the Tiangongmen? Leng Yelyo nodded. Actually, we mainly focus on processing and don't have our own equipment shop. Therefore, we don't have any so-called inventory. If we want to make equipment, we have to buy the materials first. Zhang Meng asked, Are the Tiangong men also in the South County City? Ling Yelyo shook his head. There are many Tiangongmen shops in the South County City, but his sect is on Qingyo Mountain, 30 miles west of the city. West of the city. After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng nodded as if he understood something. The carriage ran for about an hour before stopping at a remote place in the west of the city. The two of them got off the carriage, paid the fare, and ordered the carriage to wait here. Only then did Ling Yelyo lead Zhang Meng to a courtyard. Ling Yelyo walked to the door and was about to knock when the door suddenly opened. Han Yuchao walked out of the door. Sister Lu, what a coincidence. Could it be that you're here to look for your brother? Hearing Han Yuchao's words, Ling Yelyo glared at him and asked coldly, Is Li Jin at home? I'm looking for Li Jin. Is Miss Ling looking for me? As the voice fell, a burly man walked out of the door. Miss Ling, why are you looking for me? After seeing this person, Ling Yelyo hurriedly asked, Li Jin, I heard from Qian Laoqi that you hunted a diamond monster. Can you sell its skin to me? Hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Li Jin subconsciously glanced at Han Yuchao, then turned to look at Ling Yelyo, and said apologetically. It's true. We really hunted a diamond monster yesterday. It's just that you guys came too late. Just now, I sold this diamond monster to young Master Han. Hearing this, Ling Yelyo turned to Han Yuchao and said angrily, Han Yuchao, what are you doing? Han Yuchao waved his hand. No reason. I'm just happy. It's that simple. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Ling Yelyo's anger rose. Han Yuchao, the equipment that your sect makes are all metal equipment. You don't even need the skin of a diamond monster. Why do you want to buy a diamond monster? You're obviously going against me. Clap clap clap. Hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Han Yuchao clapped his hands. You're right. I'm going against you. What can you do? If you want a diamond monster, sure. Beg me. Maybe I'll be happy and give this diamond crown to you. Haha. Hearing this, Ling Yelyo laughed coldly and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Han Yuchao, you're dreaming. Han Yuchao laughed and waved to his subordinates behind him. Brothers, carry the diamond monster and let's go. Just as Han Yuchao finished speaking, two of his subordinates carried a diamond monster out of the door. Seeing the two of them carrying the diamond monster, Ling Yelyo was so angry that his eyes were spitting fire, but there was nothing he could do. Chapter 331. Seeing that the two of them were about to leave with the diamond monster, Ling Yelyo hurriedly waved her hand to stop them. She turned to look at Han Yuchao, took a deep breath, and said slowly, Han Yuchao, how much did you pay for it? I can give you double the price. What do you think? Han Yuchao smiled and shook his head. No. Ling Yelyo said, I'll give you 3 times the price. Han Yuchao waved his hand. Save it. Do you think I'm someone who lacks money? At this point, Han Yuchao paused for a moment before continuing. Let's not talk about 3 times the price. To tell you the truth, even if you give me 10 times the price, I won't sell it to you. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Ling Yelyo could no longer hold it in. She said angrily, Han Yuchao, what exactly do you want to give the diamond monster to me? Han Yuchao sneered. I've already said it. If you beg me, I might be happy and give this diamond to you. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Ling Yelyo's eyes suddenly widened. She stared at Han Yuchao and said angrily, Han Yuchao, you're too much. Han Yuchao sneered. Since you're not begging me, I'm leaving. Seeing that Han Yuchao was about to leave, Ling Yelyo hurriedly stopped him. Wait, Han Yuchao, change your condition. After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Han Yuchao suddenly turned his head to look at Ling Yelyo and said affectionately, Sister Lu, ever since I saw you for the first time, I've been deeply attracted to you. From then on, I've made a vow to marry no one else but you. Sister Lu, as long as you promise me, I can even give you me, let alone a diamond monster. Sister Lu, now I only need one word from you. As long as you promise me, this diamond is yours. After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Ling Yelyo did not immediately say anything. She only stared at Han Yuchao and did not say anything for a long time. Seeing this, Han Yuchao hurriedly said, "Sister Lu, have you already discovered my strengths?" Hearing this, Ling Yelyo said coldly, "Merits? I just want to see how shameless you are to actually use a diamond monster to trick me." After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Han Yuchao's expression immediately changed. No matter how thick-skinned he was, anger still rose in his heart. Han Yuchao sneered, "You don't agree?" Ling Yelyo said, "In your dreams." When Han Yuchao heard this, he quietly looked at Ling Yelyo. After a long while, he suddenly waved his hand at Xin Fei behind him. "Capture him. I want to see how tough he is." Hearing this, Xin Fei was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look at Han Yuchao and said hesitantly, This is a little inappropriate." When Han Yuchao heard this, he said angrily, "What's wrong with that? We agreed that you would work for me for a year. Are you going back on your word now?" After listening to their conversation, Ling Yelyo said angrily, "Han Yuchao, how dare you? So what if you're the young master of the Tiangongmen? Aren't you afraid of being punished by the prefectural governor?" When Han Yuchao heard this, he sneered, "Punishment by the prefectural governor? We got married openly, so why would he punish us?" Ling Yelyo said angrily, "Who wants to marry you?" As he said this, Ling Yelyo turned his head to Zhang Meng and said, "Ignore this lunatic. Let's go." Han Yuchao sneered, "Ling Yelyo, you still want to leave today?" Ling Yelyo turned his head to look at Han Yuchao. "You dare to stop me?" When Han Yuchao saw this, he waved his hand at Xin Fei again. "Xin Fei, go and capture him." When Xin Fei heard this, he sighed and slowly drew his sword. When Ling Yelyo saw that the situation was not good, he hurriedly pulled Zhang Meng and shouted, "Run!" When Xin Fei saw Ling Yelyo run, he could not help but be stunned. However, he heard Han Yuchao shouting non-stop, "Chase after him. You trash, you must not let him escape today." Han Yuchao's lackeys immediately chased after him. However, Xin Fei was stunned on the spot. When Han Yuchao saw that his main force did not chase after him, he could not help but say angrily, "Xin Fei, have you forgotten? We have a contract. If you go against it, I'm afraid you won't be able to return to the Heavenly Sword sect." After hearing Han Yuchao's words, Xin Fei was helpless and could only chase after Ling Yelyo's back. Although Xin Fei did not want to chase after Ling Yelyo, he had no choice but to do such a shameful thing. This was because when he came, his master had already instructed him to listen to the orders of the Han family. Although Xin Fei's martial arts were not bad among his peers, it was only not bad. Moreover, his master was only a marginal figure in the Heavenly Sword sect. If Xin Fei completed this mission well, then his name would naturally appear in the eyes of the main figures of the Heavenly Sword sect. However, if he did not complete it well and was even complained about by the Han family, then it would not be a good thing. The reason why the Heavenly Sword sect sent people out was also one of the conditions that they had reached with Han Qingyun. Although the Heavenly Sword sect's martial arts were superb and famous in the Jianghu, they did not conquer the world with their bare hands. They also needed equipment and weapons. The place where the best equipment and weapons could be made in the Anwu Kingdom was naturally the Tiangongmen. It could be said that the best equipment in the Heavenly Sword sect was made by the Tiangongmen. Han Qingyun's crafting skills could be considered first-rate, or even super first-rate, while the Tiangongmen's crafting skills were definitely the best in the Anwu Kingdom. The two great sects that the Heavenly Sword sect did not want to offend the most were the Tiangongmen and the Swordsmithing sect. The Tiangongmen were mainly famous for crafting all kinds of equipment. The Swordsmithing sect mainly crafted all kinds of weapons, especially the longswords that they crafted. They were the best in the Anwu Kingdom. Although the Heavenly Sword sect's martial arts were superb, offending these two sects would cause them to lose the supply of weapons and equipment. It would definitely be a devastating blow. It was also because of these reasons that when Xin Fei came out, his master kept reminding him to listen to the Han family's orders and not to cause a conflict between the two sections. Xin Fei was naturally not stupid. He naturally understood the logic behind this. If he messed up this matter, then he would not have to return to the Heavenly Sword sect anymore. In fact, he would even be captured by the Heavenly Sword sect to be punished. Therefore, Xin Fei was helpless. Even if he did not want to do this, he could only grit his teeth and do it. Leng Yelyo ran very quickly. After seeing Xin Fei make a move in the restaurant, she knew that they were definitely not Xin Fei's match. It was also because of this reason that Leng Yelyo decisively pulled Zhang Meng and ran away. Kikyaman was not famous for their martial arts, but for their crafting skills. Leng Yelyo's martial arts were not high. Although he felt that he was running quite fast, there was still a gap between him and Xin Fei. Leng Yelyo pulled Zhang Meng and ran in front of him with all his might. In just a short moment, he was already panting from exhaustion. However, Xin Fei stomped on the ground and became as light as a feather. In a few moments, he had already caught up to Leng Yelyo and Zhang Meng. Chapter 332. Hearing the sound of wind behind him, Leng Yelyo was so scared that his face turned pale. When he saw Han Yuchao's eyes just now, Leng Yelyo understood that Han Yuchao was serious this time. If he didn't run, then who knew what would happen? Seeing that he was still 30 to 40 meters away from the carriage, a figure flashed in front of Leng Yelyo. Xin Fei had already jumped in front of him from the air. The next moment, a cold light appeared in Xin Fei's hand, and a long sword blocked in front of Leng Yelyo. "Let's stay." Seeing that Xin Fei was blocking in front, it was impossible to stay. Leng Yelyo pulled Zhang Meng and rushed into a small alley at the side. Xin Fei sneered. He didn't want to hurt the two people in front of him. He only needed to stop them. Xin Fei's figure flew into the air again. With a turn in the air, he landed in front of Leng Yelyo and Zhang Meng again. Leng Yelyo exclaimed and pulled Zhang Meng to turn and run. Xin Fei exerted force on his feet. Just as he was about to leap into the air, he suddenly realized that one of his legs had tripped over the other. He had already fallen forward diagonally. The force on his feet actually exploded at this moment. His entire body slid forward like lightning, sticking close to the ground for a distance. He only stopped when he hit Zhang Meng's foot. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Leng Yelyo had already pulled Zhang Meng to the front of the carriage. Seeing the fierce chase in front of him, the coachman was already scared stiff. Only when he heard the person who had jumped onto the carriage urging him to hurry did he react. He hurriedly waved his whip, and the horse pulling the carriage slowly began to move. At this moment, Han Yuchao's subordinates had already caught up. They split up. Someone grabbed the carriage from behind, and someone went up to the front to stop the carriage. Seeing that someone in front was waving his hand to stop the carriage, the coachman was just about to pull the horse back when Leng Yelyo snatched the whip and whipped the horse fiercely. The horse pulling the carriage cried out in alarm and immediately moved its 4 hooves, rushing forward without a care. The two subordinates of Han Yuchao standing in front of the carriage only laughed coldly when they saw the carriage rushing towards them. They weren't afraid at all. The two of them were originally famous bandits and had good martial arts. Although they were not as good as Xin Fei, they were definitely not far off. At this moment, seeing the carriage rushing over, the two of them looked at each other and nodded slightly, understanding each other's thoughts. Therefore, the two of them separated, one on the left and one on the right. They grabbed the reins at the same time and stopped the carriage. The two of them exerted strength in their legs, and were about to separate when they suddenly felt their legs go soft. They could no longer stand and fell in front of the carriage. Seeing the carriage getting closer and closer, it was already too late for them to dodge. Cold sweat immediately appeared on their foreheads. Helpless, they could only clench their teeth, close their eyes, and wait for disaster to descend. The horse pulling the carriage was in pain from Leng Yelyo's attack. It did not care about the obstacles in front of it. When it saw someone fall in front of it, it raised its 4 hooves and leaped over the 2 people. Although the horse pulling the carriage jumped over, the wheels of the carriage could not jump over. Just like that, the carriage ran over the 2 of them. Ah! Following the 2 mournful screams, the bumpy carriage regained its stability and continued to rush forward. The 2 people blocking the carriage in front were run over by the carriage. The 2 people behind were not any better. The 2 of them grabbed the carriage. In fact, they also knew that it was impossible for them to pull the carriage. They could only watch from behind and not let Leng Yelyo run away. However, after they grabbed the carriage, they suddenly felt their legs go soft and were dragged by the carriage. They wanted to let go, but their hands could not. They could only be dragged forward by the carriage. As the carriage moved forward, the 2 of them were dragged behind. It was already impossible for them to let go. They could only let out shrill screams. After running for an unknown distance, the 2 of them felt their hands loosen and they stopped. However, at this moment, the 2 of them were already covered in bruises from being dragged by the carriage. It was a tragic sight. When Han Yuchao arrived, he thought that he would definitely be able to catch Leng Yelyo. However, he did not expect that not only did he not see his subordinates catch Leng Yelyo, but he also saw a few of his subordinates lying there moaning. Shen Fei's martial arts were strong, but when he used all his strength, the rubbing against the ground was not light. His entire clothes were already torn. As for the 2 people blocking the carriage, they were also crushed by the carriage. In the distance, there were 2 subordinates lying on the ground unable to move, but they kept screaming. Seeing this scene, Han Yuchao immediately flew into a rage. He looked at the carriage that was running further and further away and roared loudly. Leng Yelyo, just you wait. Seeing that they had escaped danger, Leng Yelyo's face was already red with excitement. She reached out and grabbed Zhang Meng, saying, "We finally escaped." Zhang Meng nodded. "We finally escaped." When he said this, Zhang Meng laughed in his heart. If it wasn't for his help, this little girl would definitely have fallen into Han Yuchao's hands today. Leng Yelyo's happiness only lasted for a moment before she became depressed again. Unfortunately, it wasn't easy to get a diamond monster, but Han Yuchao bought it first. Sigh. It won't be easy to find another diamond monster. After hearing Leng Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng's heart suddenly moved. He turned to look at Leng Yelyo and said with a smile, "If that's the case, why don't we go back and snatch that diamond monster back?" Hearing this, Leng Yelyo's eyes lit up, but soon they dimmed again. She shook her head and said, "No, their martial arts are too strong. We definitely can't beat them." Zhang Meng smiled and said, "Why should we fight with them?" "We can." As he spoke, Zhang Meng made a very secretive move. Seeing Zhang Meng's move, Leng Yelyo's eyes lit up again. "Yes. Okay, let's do that. Since Han Yuchao dares to ruin our plans, we'll go too." After saying this, Leng Yelyo also made the same gesture as Zhang Meng. After the 2 of them made this gesture, they both looked up to the sky and laughed. Leng Yelyo turned to look at the coachman and said with a smile, "Please turn back, we still have something to do." After what happened just now, the honest coachman was still trembling in fear. After hearing Leng Yelyo's words, he immediately shook his head. "No, no, don't go back." Seeing this, Leng Yelyo hurriedly said, "Don't be afraid. With us here, you'll be fine." The coachman wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said in a trembling voice, "You guys, don't make things difficult for me. I won't go back no matter what." Seeing that the coachman wasn't willing to go back, Leng Yelyo could only say, "We'll give you more money, okay?" Hearing this, the coachman shook his head again. "I'm not going back." Chapter 333. Seeing that the coachman refused to go back, Leng Yelyo and Zhang Meng had no choice but to get off the carriage and walk in the direction they came from. Before they got close to the scene, they heard Han Yuchao's angry roar from afar. Trash, idiots, there were so many people, but the two of them got away. Look at you, you call yourselves masters, but how can masters be crushed by a carriage? And the two of you, are you stupid? The carriage dragged you away, don't you know how to let go? And Shin Fei, Master Shin, didn't you say you were very powerful? How did you end up like this? I think you're just too proud of yourself. Hearing Han Yuchao's angry roars and seeing the miserable state of his subordinates, Ling Yelyo almost laughed out loud. Luckily, Zhang Meng's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast enough to cover her mouth, preventing her from making a sound. Hearing Han Yuchao's angry roar and reprimand, his subordinates didn't dare to speak. They could only lower their heads and listen obediently. Even Shen Fei had his head drooped, looking listless. He had been practicing martial arts for so many years, but he didn't expect that he would trip over himself. He slid so close to the ground, but fortunately, his face wasn't injured. It was a blessing in disguise. Hearing Han Yuchao's reprimand, Shin Fei blushed and wanted to find a hole to hide in. Everyone waited for Han Yuchao to finish reprimanding before asking in a low voice, "That girl ran away. What should we do?" Hearing this, Han Yuchao's anger, which had subsided, burst out again. "You trash, that girl ran away. What are we doing here? Go home, idiots!" At the end, Han Yuchao was almost roaring. Everyone was so scared that they hurriedly turned their heads and hid to the side. At this moment, the two people carrying the diamond monster walked over. Seeing the diamond monster, Han Yuchao's mood suddenly improved. He sneered. Kikiaman wants to make a decent piece of equipment, so they won't let go of this diamond monster. Zhang Laoqi, who was carrying the diamond monster, came up and said, "Sir, since they want this diamond monster, let's use it to set a trap for them. Even if they know it's a trap, they'll still jump in. Don't you think so, young master?" After hearing Zhang Laoqi's words, Han Yuchao was overjoyed. He reached out and patted Zhang Laoqi's shoulder. "Yes, you're right. What kind of trap should we set to catch that girl?" Zhang Laoqi rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Actually, it's simple. We just need to have this diamond monster in our hands and then tell Ling Yelyo that we're waiting for her in the garden in the west of the city. For this diamond monster, even if she knows that this is a trap, she still has to come." After hearing Zhang Laoqi's words, Han Yuchao pondered for a moment before laughing out loud. After laughing, Han Yuchao clenched his teeth and said, "Ling Yelyo, nice to meet you. I want to see if you can escape from my hands." As he spoke, Han Yuchao stretched out his hand and clenched his fist to show his determination. Seeing this, Zhang Meng leaned over to Ling Yelyo's ear and asked in a low voice, "Will you go if they set up this trap?" Hearing this, Ling Yelyo was stunned for a moment before nodding sadly. Seeing Ling Yelyo like this, Zhang Meng sighed in his heart. Han Yuchao had already calculated that as long as he had this diamond monster, Ling Yelyo would definitely not be able to escape from his hands. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng turned to look at Ling Yelyo and said in a low voice, "With this diamond monster, are you sure you can defeat the Tiangongman?" Ling Yelyo was stunned for a moment before shaking her head. "I don't know." After hearing Ling Yelyo's answer, Zhang Meng thought for a moment before saying in a low voice, "Since that's the case, let's go back first." Hearing this, Ling Yelyo said anxiously, "Then aren't we going to steal that diamond monster?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "Even if you have that diamond monster, you might not be able to defeat them. Why are you still going to steal it? Let's go back and talk about it." As he spoke, Zhang Meng pulled Ling Yelyo back. Ling Yelyo suddenly broke free from Zhang Meng's hand and said in a low voice, "You don't dare." Zhang Meng shook his head. "It's not that I don't dare, but it's useless to steal it. Why waste time?" Ling Yelyo said unhappily, "You just don't dare?" Hearing this, Zhang Meng could not help but laugh. "How do you think I don't dare?" Ling Yelyo said, "You saw that Han Yuchao and the others are powerful, so you don't dare." Zhang Meng could not be bothered to argue with Ling Yelyo. He reached out and grabbed Ling Yelyo again before walking back. "Alright, let me tell you. I have a way for you to win this battle. Hearing this, Leng Yelyo shook his head. You're lying to me. Even my mother can't do anything. What can you do? Zhang Meng smiled. Don't worry, I really have a way. It's just that I won't tell you yet. The two of them chatted as they walked back in the direction they came from. The Kikyaman was in the east of the city, while they were in the west. If the two of them walked all the way back, it would take them a lot of time. They were lucky. They didn't walk far before they found a carriage that could carry people. After negotiating the price, they sat in the carriage and sped towards the Kikyaman. Even though they were in a carriage, it still took them nearly an hour to reach the east gate. After leaving the city, after a while, the coachman pulled the galloping horse and stopped in front of the Kikyaman. This time, with Leng Yelyo leading the way, no one stopped Zhang Meng. The two of them entered the Kikyaman and walked towards the backyard. The Kikyaman's courtyard was very big. It was divided into two parts. One part was where Leng Yelyo and her mother lived. The other part was where they made equipment. The rest of the people, including Sun Qiaoer's two disciples, had their own homes outside the courtyard. They didn't live in the courtyard. Leng Yelyo led Zhang Meng to the backyard. As soon as they entered the backyard, a middle-aged woman came up to them. Miss, why are you only back now? Madam is looking for you. Leng Yelyo responded and asked for Sun Qiaoer's location. She then led Zhang Meng to the living room. After Sun Qiaoer finished her dinner, she sat there in a daze. She was thinking about the competition with the Tiangongmen. Until now, although the two sides hadn't officially competed, Leng Yelyo knew that even if they didn't compete, she would be the one to lose in the end. This competition wasn't fair to begin with. Using leather armor and metal armor to compete in defense wasn't a fair competition. Everyone knew that as long as it was metal armor, it would definitely surpass leather armor in terms of defense. What was the function of leather armor? It was to reduce weight. In addition, wearing leather armor wouldn't affect one's mobility. This was the real function of leather armor. Chapter 334. Everyone knew that no one would choose leather armor as their main defensive equipment. Instead, they would choose metal armor. However, this time, they were competing with leather armor and metal armor. Just as Sun Qiaoer was deep in thought, the door to the living room was pushed open. Leng Yelyo and Zhang Meng walked in. Mother, are you looking for me? Lil Lu, you're back. Mother wants to ask you if you found what we wanted? Hearing Sun Qiaoer's question, Leng Yelyo shook his head. No. At this point, Leng Yelyo quickly walked to Sun Qiaoer's side and said angrily, originally, Li Jin and his group from the west of the city hunted a diamond monster. Unfortunately, Han Yuchao and the others beat them to it. What a pity. Hearing this, Sun Qiaoer nodded and said disappointedly, I see. As she spoke, Sun Qiaoer suddenly saw Zhang Meng behind Leng Yelyo. She asked curiously, Lil Lu, who is this person? Hearing Sun Qiaoer's question, Leng Yelyo quickly pointed at Zhang Meng and said with a smile, I still don't know your name. Zhang Meng smiled and cupped his fists at Sun Qiaoer. I'm Zhang Meng. I originally wanted to ask someone from Kikyaman to make equipment for me. I didn't expect to encounter such a situation. After Zhang Meng finished speaking, before Sun Qiaoer could say anything, Leng Yelyo spoke first. Mother, he said that he could help us. That's why we brought him here. Oh! Hearing this, Sun Qiaoer's eyes lit up. She turned to look at Zhang Meng. You know how to make equipment? Hearing this, Zhang Meng shook his head. No. Sun Qiaoer was a little disappointed when she heard this. She asked again, Prince Zhang has good materials to make equipment? Zhang Meng shook his head again. No. Seeing Zhang Meng shake his head again, Sun Qiaoer's heart, which had been filled with anticipation, turned cold once again. Prince Zhang doesn't know how to craft equipment, nor does he have any good materials to craft equipment. So, how does Prince Zhang intend to help us? Hearing Sun Qiao's question, Zhang Meng smiled and said slowly, "Sect Master Sun, there is something that I don't understand. Can you tell me?" Sun Qiao nodded. "What is it?" Zhang Meng asked. "The defensive power of leather armor is not as good as that of metal armor. This is something that everyone knows. But why does sect leader Sun still want to use leather armor to compete with metal armor? Could it be that sect leader Sun had absolute confidence in winning? Would you agree to this duel? I don't understand this point, so I would like to ask sect master Sun to enlighten me." After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Sun Qiao pondered for a moment before slowly saying, "Actually, this matter will spread out sooner or later. Even if I tell you, it doesn't matter." Speaking of this, Sun Qiao's tone paused, and then she explained the reason for this matter. Tiangongmen, Sword Crafting Sect, Medicine King Pavilion. These three sects focused on equipment, weapons, and materials. These were the three most important sections. Tiangongmen was the sect that crafted the most equipment in the Jianghu. Sword Crafting Sect was the sect that crafted all kinds of weapons. Medicine King Pavilion was the sect that refined all kinds of pills. The three sects were powerful, but they were still not satisfied. They wanted to improve their strength. However, the development of the sect's strength had reached a bottleneck. They needed to inject new technology. The three sects turned their attention to some of the smaller sections. They wanted to absorb these sections. After obtaining the technology of these smaller sects, they could use it to develop their own sect's strength. The three sects joined forces and issued challenges to the smaller sects that they wanted the most. Of course, these smaller sects could choose not to accept the challenge, but the prerequisite was that they had to join the sect. Under such circumstances, Kikyamen was powerless. Although the Tiangongmen's conditions were unreasonable, there was still a glimmer of hope. If Kikyamen did not accept the challenge, then the Tiangongmen would use extreme methods to force Kikyamen to submit. With the strength of a smaller sect like Kikyamen, it would be a matter of minutes for the Tiangongmen to defeat them, or even destroy them. For the sake of Kikyamen's continued existence, and to prevent the Tiangongmen from causing trouble, Sun Qiao could only accept this unfair challenge to obtain a glimmer of hope. However, Sun Qiao also knew that this glimmer of hope was not much different from having none. It was basically impossible to use leather armor to defeat metal armor. After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Zhang Meng nodded silently. He really did not understand why Kikyamen would agree to such an unfair challenge from the Tiangongmen. Now he understood. Although this challenge was still unfair, it was still considered very fair compared to the Tiangongmen who would cause trouble in the dark or blatantly destroy Kikyamen. However, although this seemed very fair, Zhang Meng knew very well that Kikyamen had no chance of winning even if he did not understand the process of making leather armor. Zhang Meng raised his head to look at Sun Qiao and asked, "If you get the diamond monster's leather, do you have a chance of winning?" After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Sun Qiao was stunned for a moment, then sighed. "I don't know either. The Tiangongmen's craftsmanship is considered to be the best in the world. If they want to make a good piece of equipment, the defense of this equipment will definitely be shockingly high." Sun Qiao sighed again. "To be honest, even if we get the diamond monster's leather, we don't have much of a chance of winning against the Tiangongmen." As soon as Sun Qiao finished speaking, Leng Yelyo exclaimed, "Mother, didn't you say that as long as we get the diamond monster's leather, we have a chance of winning against them?" Sun Qiao shook her head. "There is indeed a chance of winning against them, but the chance is too slim. Moreover, we don't have all the materials we need, so we can't make the perfect equipment." Leng Yelyo quickly said, "Mother, what other materials do you need? I'll find them for you. We must beat them so that we don't have to see Han Yuchao's face." Sun Qiao patted Leng Yelyo lovingly and said with a bitter smile, "If it was so easy to get, I wouldn't be in such a difficult position." When Leng Yelyo heard this, she hurriedly asked, "Mother, what materials do you need?" Tell me quickly. If you don't tell me, how will I know if I can find them? When Zhang Meng heard this, he nodded. That's right, Sect Master Sunday. As long as there's a way to defeat them, just say it. Everyone will think of a way together. We'll eventually think of a way. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiao's gaze froze and she frowned. She subconsciously glanced at Ling Yelyo before turning her gaze back to Zhang Meng and asking coldly, Prince Zhang, why are you helping us? After hearing Sun Qiao's question, Zhang Meng was stunned. Chapter 335. Seeing that Zhang Meng was stunned, Sun Qiao was even more suspicious. What was this person's motive for wanting to help her? Could it be? Thinking of this, Sun Qiao turned to look at her daughter. Could it be? Seeing that Sun Qiao was on high alert, Zhang Meng smiled bitterly and shook his head. Sect leader Sun, I didn't mean that. My main purpose for coming here is to ask Sect Leader Sun to help me make the black feather cloak. Also, I want to maintain a long-term cooperation with you. Because I think there are still many things that I need you to make. If you become Tiangongman, it will be very inconvenient for me. That's why I want to help you. Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. If it's possible, you can move in with me. It will be much more convenient for you to make equipment for me. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiao's eyes lit up. She quickly probed. May I know which sect Prince Zhang is from? Where do you live? In Sun Qiao's opinion, if Zhang Meng was a disciple of a big sect, it would be reasonable for him to say such words. If there was no conflict between this sect and his own sect, then even if he moved over, it would only be beneficial to him and not detrimental to him. Kikyaman had too few people. Plus, they didn't have any powerful martial artists to protect them. This made their strength even weaker. If Kikyaman could let this person's sect protect them, then Kikyaman wouldn't have any worries. It wouldn't be a problem for them to grow and expand. To be honest, Sun Qiao wasn't worried about technology. She was worried about safety. After so many years, the reason why Kikyaman didn't store any materials or equipment was naturally related to safety. Kikyaman's headquarters was in this courtyard. The guards in this courtyard were ordinary martial artists. It was impossible to rely on these people to protect Kikyaman. If there was a large sect to protect them, then all these problems would be solved. Thinking of this, Sun Qiao nervously looked at Zhang Meng. She would wait for him to tell her the name of their sect, and then analyze the strength of this sect to see if she could help Kikyaman. Hearing Sun Qiao's words and seeing her eyes, Zhang Meng naturally understood what she was thinking. Zhang Meng shook his head. I'm sorry to disappoint Sect Leader Sunday. I'm not a disciple of a big sect, but the head of a small mountain stronghold. However, please rest assured, Sect Leader Sunday. If you're willing to move over, I can absolutely guarantee that no one in this world will be able to harm you. When Zhang Meng said this, although he was full of confidence, Sun Qiao didn't believe him. No matter how well the person in front of him spoke, without the backing of a large sect, everything would be in vain. The large sects had the advantage of numbers and expert. It was easy for them to protect a Kikyaman. However, relying on the protection of this young man in front of him, Sun Qiao felt that it was a little unreliable. Thinking of this, Sun Qiao coughed lightly and changed the topic. By the way, you haven't eaten yet, right? Go and eat first. If there's anything else, we can talk later. Hearing this, Ling Yelyo immediately turned to look at Zhang Meng and said with a smile, Let's go and eat. I'm really a little hungry. After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Zhang Meng understood that she didn't believe him. However, he also knew that if Sun Qiao didn't know his strength, she wouldn't believe him no matter how he explained. Since she wouldn't believe him, Zhang Meng naturally didn't want to explain further. He stood up and cupped his hands at Sun Qiao before following Ling Yelyo to the dining room. Looking at Zhang Meng's back as he left, Sun Qiao was puzzled. Until now, she still didn't understand what this young man was trying to say. His goal was to get her to go to their stronghold to make equipment for him. However, did a stronghold really need to make so many pieces of equipment? Although there weren't many people in Kikyaman, if they went all out, the production speed would be very fast. If there wasn't a corresponding supply of goods, would everyone be idle there? Wait, Sun Qiao suddenly remembered something. What kind of equipment did this young man want her to make? Black feather cloak. This young man wanted her to make the black feather cloak in advance. Thinking of the black feather cloak, Sun Qiao was a little uneasy. Only then did she remember that in order to make the black feather cloak, she had to use the feather of the nightmare eagle. Not only was the nightmare eagle's defense amazing, but it was also quite powerful in terms of physical and magical attacks. It was precisely because of the nightmare eagle's strength that the feather of the nightmare eagle rarely appeared. It could even be said that it didn't appear once in a few decades. Then, where did this young man get the feather of the nightmare eagle from? This young man wanted her to send someone to make the black feather cloak. This meant that it was impossible for him to only make one black feather cloak. How was this possible? At this moment, Sun Qiao's eyes were filled with doubt. If this was really the case, could it be that he really had a way to hunt down the nightmare eagle? Thinking of this, Sun Qiao was a little uneasy. Could it be that the mountain stronghold that this young man was talking about was actually quite a large one, the kind that had hundreds of thousands of people? If that was really the case, it was no different from a large sect. If she guessed correctly, the mountain stronghold that this young man was talking about was an extremely large one. Then, to protect a small Kikyaman would be a simple matter. At this moment, Sun Qiao's tightly knitted eyebrows finally relaxed. If this matter was as she guessed, then even if she didn't compete with the Tiangongmen, moving to this young man's mountain stronghold wouldn't be a problem. In the face of such a large mountain stronghold, even if the Tiangongmen were strong, they would definitely give some face. Since this was the case, Sun Qiao decided to wait for Zhang Meng to finish his meal before asking him in detail to see if the mountain stronghold that he was talking about was as large as she had imagined. Of course, Zhang Meng didn't know about Sun Qiao's thoughts. He was thinking that this was a good opportunity. If he could bring the Kikyaman back to his mountain stronghold, it would definitely be of great help to his future development. With the help of the Kikyaman and the production of some good equipment, it would be difficult for his auction house not to become popular. Others were worried about not having good materials. No matter how skilled they were, they wouldn't be able to produce good equipment. However, Zhang Meng was different. He wasn't worried about not having good materials, but he was worried about not having good skills. As long as Zhang Meng wanted good materials, he would definitely be able to get them. However, Zhang Meng wouldn't be able to get the crafting skills. Chapter 336. After the incident with the Tianji sect, Zhang Meng realized that it was better to have it himself than to ask others for help. Now that he had Zhang Leji to help him with the mechanical engineering technique, it should not be a problem. If he could bring the people from Kikyaman back to Twin Dragon Mountain, then he would have no problem making leather armor. Next, Zhang Meng needed to contact more people from all walks of life and bring them back to Twin Dragon Mountain to make all kinds of equipment for him. Leng Yelyo, who was sitting on the other side, saw that Zhang Meng was deep in thought and could not help but ask, "Hey, what are you thinking about?" Zhang Meng smiled and shook his head. "Nothing." Leng Yelyo pouted, "Liar, I can tell that you are thinking about something. It's fine if you don't want to say it." Hearing this, Zhang Meng smiled and said, "I'm thinking, how can I help you win this competition?" Leng Yelyo's eyes lit up. "Do you have a way?" Zhang Meng hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I think so." Leng Yelyo was overjoyed when he heard Zhang Meng's words. He put down his bowl and asked, "What is it? Tell me." Zhang Meng shook his head. "I can't say it. It won't work if I say it." Ling Yelyo frowned. Fine, don't say it. It's as if I want to know. Zhang Meng could only shake his head with a bitter smile. After the two finished their meal, they returned to the living room. Sun Qiao saw that Zhang Meng had returned and quickly gestured for Zhang Meng to sit down. She then asked softly, Prince Zhang, I forgot to ask. How many people do you have in your village? Zhang Meng lowered his head and thought for a moment before saying slowly, about 700 to 800 people. Sun Qiao was disappointed when she heard Zhang Meng's words. A village of 700 to 800 people was nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands she had imagined. Zhang Meng knew what Sun Qiao was thinking when he saw the disappointment on her face. However, even if he knew what she was thinking, there was nothing he could do. Sun Qiao coughed softly when she saw that Zhang Meng did not speak. She covered up her rudeness and asked softly, Prince Zhang, this competition with the Tiangongmen is very important. If we lose, according to the contract, we must join the Tiangongmen. Speaking up to this point, Sun Qiao paused for a moment before continuing, Young Master Zhang should also know that we basically have no chance of winning this competition. I think that the chances of us losing are very high. At that time, I'm afraid that we will let young Master Zhang down. Before Zhang Meng could reply, Ling Yelyo interrupted Sun Qiao and said, Mother, Prince Zhang said that he has a way to help us. Sun Qiao was stunned when she heard this. She turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked doubtfully, Really? Prince Zhang really has a way to help us? Zhang Meng nodded. Right, if you lose the competition, you have to join the Tiangongmen. However, if you win, what will happen? Sun Qiao smiled bitterly when she heard Zhang Meng's words. According to the contract, if we lose, we have to join the Tiangongmen unconditionally. If the Tiangongmen lose, they have to give us their precious cauldron of heaven and earth. Cauldron of heaven and earth. Zhang Meng's eyes lit up when he heard this name. With such a grand name, it must be something good. Zhang Meng asked, What is the use of the Tiangongmen's cauldron of heaven and earth? Sun Qiao explained when she heard Zhang Meng's question. When refining equipment, there are many metals that cannot be smelted using normal method. They can only be smelted using special items. The cauldron of heaven and earth is one of the treasures that can be used to refine these items. Zhang Meng was slightly disappointed when he heard this. He asked, Can the items refined from the cauldron of heaven and earth add attributes? Attributes? Sun Qiao was stunned when she heard Zhang Meng's question. She asked curiously, What is an attribute? Is it a type of metal? Zhang Meng knew that he had misspoken when he heard Sun Qiao's question. He quickly nodded and said, Yes, an attribute is a type of metal. Sun Qiao nodded as if she understood. She frowned and asked, Why have I never heard of this type of metal? Zhang Meng wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. It's too rare. This type of metal is too rare. That's why sect leader Sun has never heard of it. Sun Qiao nodded when she heard Zhang Meng's answer. She then asked, By the way, I heard from my daughter that Prince Zhang has a way to help us. Do you have any good ideas? Zhang Meng nodded when he heard this. He then asked, By the way, can you tell me what you will use to refine the equipment for the competition if you can't find the diamond monster's skin? Sun Qiao thought for a moment when she heard Zhang Meng's question. She then said softly, Actually, to be honest with you, even if I have the diamond monster's skin, I don't have the confidence to win. If the Tiangongmen were to refine this equipment with special materials, then no matter what material I use to refine the equipment, I won't be able to beat them. Zhang Meng nodded when he heard this. Sect leader Sun, if that's the case, the Tiangongmen will definitely use special materials to refine a piece of equipment to compete with us? Sun Qiao nodded. That's right. In order to win this competition, I believe that they will definitely do that. After all, for the sake of fairness, if they lose, they will have to give their cauldron of heaven and earth to me. They won't be willing to accept such a loss, so they have to win. Zhang Meng was puzzled when he heard this. He asked, If they have a special skill, won't the Kikyaman have an ending to deal with them? Sun Qiao smiled bitterly when she heard Zhang Meng's question. She shook her head. The two types of equipment have different functions. Naturally, they don't have the same special skill. Metal armors were all about defensive power. The higher the defensive power of the equipment, the better the equipment. Although the requirements for leather armor are the same, the higher the defense, the better. However, the material itself is also the most important factor. The defense of a leather armor mainly depends on the hardness of the material. This is the most important factor. When making leather armor, you can only add more defense to the key parts of the armor. This way, you can protect the vital parts and reduce the weight of the leather armor. This kind of leather armor is mainly suitable for people who specialize in agility or women. Sun Qiao paused for a moment before she continued. Among the materials that I know of, there is basically no monster skin that can beat metal. Even if there is, we won't be able to obtain it. Therefore, we basically have no chance of winning this competition. Regardless of whether we have the diamond monster skin or not, we have no chance of winning. After listening to Sun Qiao's explanation, Zhang Meng nodded. He pondered for a moment before he slowly said, "It's okay, as long as you listen to me." Chapter 337. Zhang Meng continued, Sect Master Sun, as long as you listen to me, I guarantee that you can win this universal cauldron. At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. I can help you win this competition, but I ask Sect Master Sun to promise me that after winning this competition, you will immediately go to my twin Ox Mountain to settle down. What do you think? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiao was overjoyed and hurriedly asked, Prince Zhang, do you have any good ideas? Zhang Meng nodded. Sect Master Sun, don't worry. As long as I'm here, you definitely won't lose. At this moment, a woman in her 30s suddenly walked in. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, she suddenly sneered. Who is this? With you here, we won't lose. Who do you think you are? How dare you boast like this? As the woman spoke, she had already arrived in front of Sun Qiao and bowed. Master, disciple is back. Hearing this, Sun Qiao nodded. You're back. How did it go? The middle-aged woman shook her head. Disciple went to many places but couldn't find it. After hearing the middle-aged woman's answer, Sun Qiao sighed. I know. You can go back and rest. After hearing Sun Qiao's words, the middle-aged woman didn't leave. Instead, she turned her head to look at Zhang Meng and suddenly said, I was wondering who it was. Isn't this the person who came in this morning and said that he would help us? Speaking of this, the middle-aged woman's eyes turned cold. Master, who let this person in? Didn't we agree that no outsiders were allowed to come in during this period? Hearing the middle-aged woman's words, Leng Yelyo hurriedly said, Senior sister, this is Prince Zhang. I let him in. He said that he could help us. The middle-aged woman was Sun Qiao's eldest disciple, Han Gyun. In Kikyaman, other than Sun Qiao, she had the final say. After hearing Leng Yelyo's words, Han Gyun faintly said, Junior apprentice sister, at this critical juncture, we must not let down our guard. This person's background is unknown. I think it's better to be careful and let him leave quickly. Our Kikyaman's matters will be handled by ourselves. When Leng Yelyo heard this, he hurriedly said, Eldest senior sister, Prince Zhang can really help us. Just trust him this time. Han Guyan flatly refused. No, this is Kikyaman's business. How can we let outsiders interfere? Moreover, what ability does this person have to meddle in our affairs? Speaking of this, Han Gyun turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked with a sneer, Young master, do you have any good materials, or do you have some exquisite craftsmanship? Hearing Han Gyun's question, Zhang Meng shook his head. No, I don't know how to craft equipment, nor do I have any good materials. After hearing Zhang Meng's answer, Han Guiyun fiercely glared at him and coldly shouted, "Since you don't know anything, what are you still doing here? Get out!" Hearing Han Guiyun's angry shout, Ling Yelyo hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed her hand. "Senior apprentice sister, he can really help us. If you don't believe me, you can ask my mother." When Han Guiyun heard this, she turned to look at Sun Qiao and asked softly, "Master, this person's background is unknown. We don't know what he is thinking, especially at this critical juncture. We shouldn't cause trouble. What's more, this person doesn't have any good materials or craftsmanship skills. Even if he wants to help us, how can he help us? This person is obviously a liar. Master, please give the order to drive this person out." After hearing Han Guiyun's words, Sun Qiao couldn't help but frown. She slowly said, "Although Prince Zhang doesn't have any good materials or craftsmanship skills, since he said he can help us, we will believe him for the time being. You don't need to say anything more." When Han Guiyun heard this, she hurriedly said, "Master, if we keep this person here, I'm afraid that this person will find out about our sect's secrets. That would be terrible." When Sun Qiao heard this, she turned to look at Zhang Meng and shook her head. "I've already decided on this matter. You don't need to say anything more." After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Han Guiyun was unwilling to give up. She slowly walked in front of Zhang Meng and coldly said, "Boy, don't try to play any tricks. I'll be watching you." After saying this, Han Guiyun left the hall with a sneer. Looking at Han Guiyun's departing figure, Zhang Meng turned to look at Ling Yelyo and asked doubtfully, "Why is her temper so bad?" Ling Yelyo smiled and shook her head. "Zhang de Gu, don't be offended. Eldest senior sister's temper is like this. As long as she wants to say something, no one can stop her. It's just that after she said it, she even forgot about it." Sun Qiao also nodded. "Her temper is like this. She's frank and outspoken. But after so many years, Kikyaman was able to survive thanks to her." Zhang Meng naturally had nothing to say about other people's sex matters. He could only agree casually. Sun Qiao pondered for a moment before slowly asking, "By the way, Prince Zhang said that he can help me. How does Prince Zhang want to help us?" Although Han Guiyun's question just now was very unreasonable, it was also what Sun Qiao wanted to know. Although the person in front of her said that he could help her, how could he help her? This wasn't something that could just be said. It had to be done for real. Moreover, the Tiangongmen were very powerful. In terms of forging techniques, they were quite brilliant. Even after so many years of making equipment, she could not think of any way to beat them. Prince Zhang in front of her had admitted that he did not know how to make equipment. Since that was the case, how could he help her? In fact, trusting Zhang Meng was only a matter of helplessness for Sun Qiao. When it came to competing with the Tiangongmen, Sun Qiao had no way of winning. Kikyaman's sect was too small and it was not safe enough. Therefore, they had not accumulated any high-grade materials. Suddenly, the Tiangongmen said that they wanted to compete. It was not easy to obtain a high-grade material to make equipment. High-grade materials were things that could only be encountered by chance. Even in 8 to 10 years, one might not even come across one, let alone now that they were in a hurry to use them. On the other hand, the Tiangongmen were different. Their sect was very powerful and they had invited many experts. After so many years, who knew how many high-grade materials they had accumulated? If they wanted to compete with Kikyaman, they only needed to use a high-grade material to make equipment. There was no need to buy it now. This was the difference between the two sections. Under such circumstances, Sun Qiao had long given up hope. She really could not think of any way to win this competition. After hearing Sun Qiao's question, Zhang Meng pondered for a moment before he smiled and said, "May I know what kind of equipment sect leader Sun wants to make?" Sun Qiao was stunned. For a moment she was speechless. Chapter 338. After being stunned for a while, Sun Qiaoer asked curiously, Prince Zhang, what do you mean? At this point, Sun Qiaoer couldn't continue. Originally, she thought that even if the person in front of her didn't have superb production skills, since he was willing to help her and spoke so confidently, he should have some good materials. Otherwise, where did this person's confidence come from? Moreover, Sun Qiaoer remembered very clearly that the person in front of her had wanted them to help make the black feather cloak. It would not be strange if the person who had the black feather cloak's feathers had other precious materials as well. After hearing Sun Qiaoer's question, Zhang Meng did not beat around the bush and said directly, Sect Leader Sun, the competition between you and the Tianji sect is a test of defense. How do you want to test the defense? Sun Qiaoer calmed herself down and asked. Naturally, they wanted to use all kinds of weapons to test the defense of the two pieces of equipment. After hearing Sun Qiaoer's answer, Zhang Meng nodded. Since this is the test, Sect Leader Sun, please use the best materials in Kikyaman to make a piece of equipment. When the time comes, you'll definitely win. What? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiaoer stood up in shock and stared at Zhang Meng. After a while, she shouted sternly, Are you playing with me? Seeing this, Zhang Meng shook his head. Don't worry, I won't lie to you. As long as you do as I say, you won't lose. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiaoer weakly sat back in her seat and sighed. She muttered to herself, Sigh, I knew it would be like this. Seeing her mother's disappointed look, Ling Yelyo quickly walked up to Zhang Meng and said angrily, Are you lying to us? Seeing the mother and daughter's disappointed look, Zhang Meng could only smile bitterly and shake his head. Why would I lie to you? What good would it do me to do that? Right now, I just want to help you win this competition. Hurry up and return to Twin Bull Mountain with me. At this point, Zhang Meng sighed. You don't know how many things are waiting for me to do. I don't have time to lie to you. Leng Yelyo's eyes lit up when he heard that. Could it be that you have some special technique that can make our equipment's defense stronger? After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng was just about to deny it, but his mind suddenly moved. He nodded and said with a smile, You're really smart, seeing through it with just a hint. To tell you the truth, I really do have a technique that can increase a piece of equipment's defense by a lot. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiaoer's eyes lit up. Just as she was about to speak, Leng Yelyo spoke first. Zhang de Gu, since that's the case, why don't I find a piece of equipment for you to experiment with and show us? What do you think? Zhang Meng shook his head after hearing this. No, definitely not. Leng Yelyo asked curiously, Why not? Zhang Meng sighed. To tell you the truth, this is a secret passed down in our family. We won't use it easily. Every time we use it, we have to pay a huge price. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Leng Yelyo hurriedly asked, What's the price? If it's gold coins, can I ask my mother to give it to you? Zhang Meng shook his head and said word by word, It's not gold coins, it's lifespan. Every time it's used, it will reduce 3 years of lifespan. That's why the armor's defense is increased by several times. When Zhang Meng said that he had this technique, Sun Qiaoer did not believe it. After so many years, she had never heard of such a technique. If such a technique existed in the underworld, it would have been spread around long ago. How could she not have heard of it? After hearing Zhang Meng's explanation, she came to a realization. The reason why this technique did not spread was because every time it was used, it would consume 3 years of lifespan. This was not a joke. How many 3 years could a person have? Thinking of this, Sun Qiaoer felt grateful. Her doubtful mood immediately turned into guilt. She did not expect that the person in front of her would be willing to use 3 years of lifespan to help her win this battle. Looking at Zhang Meng's serious expression, Ling Yelyo's eyes turned red. She grabbed Zhang Meng's hand. No, don't do this. Saying this, Ling Yelyo turned to look at Sun Qiaoer and said loudly, Mother, even if we lose this time, we can't let Zhang De do this. Hearing this, Sun Xiaoer nodded and said slowly, Lu is right. We can't let Prince Zhang pay such a huge price. This matter, let's just forget about it. Hearing this, Zhang Meng had a bad feeling. He quickly said, It's okay. It's just 3 years of lifespan. As long as you agree to go to Twin Bull Mountain with me, it's worth it. Leng Yelyo shook her head vigorously. No, I won't agree. At the end, Leng Yelyo was so touched by Zhang Meng that she was about to cry. Seeing this, Zhang Meng could only smile and say, It's okay. The fortune teller said that I can live for more than 100 years. It's okay even if I lose 3 years of lifespan. At this moment, Sun Xiaoer came back to her senses. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, she quickly waved her hand and said, It's okay. Even if we lose this competition, we'll just join the Tiangongmen. It's not a big deal. But if Prince Zhang uses this secret technique and loses 3 years of lifespan, I'll feel bad about it. It's better not to mention this again. Seeing that the mother and daughter had rejected his good intentions, Zhang Meng was helpless and could only say, Actually, it's not as serious as you think. Although I lost 3 years of lifespan when I used the technique. But in the future, I'll slowly make up for it. I'll be able to make up for it. So, please don't worry. Hearing this, Leng Yelyo was overjoyed. She quickly asked, Then how can I make up for the 3 years of lifespan that I lost? Seeing that Leng Yelyo was determined to clarify this matter, Zhang Meng's mind raced. He suddenly had an idea and said with a smile, As long as you eat some supplements, you'll naturally be able to make up for the lost income. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiaoer secretly nodded her head. In this world, there were many precious elixirs that could cure hundreds of diseases and extend one's lifespan. The person in front of her said that eating supplements could make up for the lost lifespan. It should be credible. Since there was a way to make up for it, Sun Xiaoer's heart relaxed a little. She said with a smile, Prince Zhang, since there's a way to make up for it, how about this? You use the secret technique for us once. We'll kick him in to find elixirs for you to make up for your lost lifespan. What do you think? After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Zhang Meng hurriedly nodded his head. Okay, no problem. This way, it'll be the best of both worlds. I won't lose my lifespan and you can win this competition. Chapter 339. When Leng Yelyo heard that Zhang Meng would have to consume 3 years of his lifespan to use this skill, she dismissed the thought after thinking about the side effects of using this skill. Sun Xiaoer, on the other hand, was still skeptical of Zhang Meng's words. She had never heard of such a magical skill. Although Sun Xiaoer wanted Zhang Meng to try and see the effects of this skill, she couldn't bring herself to say it because the side effects of this skill were too strong. However, for Sun Xiaoer to place all her hopes on this skill, Sun Xiaoer still couldn't feel at ease. Sun Xiaoer turned to look at Zhang Meng and said with a smile, If Prince Zhang were to use this skill once, how many spiritual herbs would you need to replenish your lost lifespan? As she said this, Sun Xiaoer was also thinking about where to find some spiritual herbs to let Prince Zhang try it once so that she wouldn't have to worry. After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Zhang Meng immediately understood her thoughts. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said. He pondered for a while and said slowly, According to the dosage, about 1,000-year-old ginseng would be enough. 1,000-year-old ginseng? Sun Xiaoer exclaimed when she heard Zhang Meng's words. Prince Zhang, do you need 1,000-year-old ginseng to use this skill once? Zhang Meng nodded. Something like that. 1,000-year-old ginseng should be enough to replenish my lifespan. After listening to Zhang Meng's affirmative answer, Sun Xiaoer couldn't help but frown deeply. The value of 1,000-year-old ginseng was definitely immeasurable. Moreover, it wasn't easy to find 1,000-year-old ginseng. A rare spiritual herb like this was a treasure that could only be found by chance. Every 1,000-year-old ginseng that appeared would cause many people to fight for it. After so many years, Although Kikyaman had accumulated a lot of wealth, it still wasn't enough compared to the value of 1,000-year-old ginseng. Thinking of this, Sun Qiao's expression couldn't help but change. A moment later, she calmed down and sighed. If we need to consume 1,000-year-old ginseng every time we use a skill, then it seems that we really can't afford it. When Zhang Meng heard this, he waved his hand and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. As long as sect leader Sun agrees to my request, you don't have to worry about the 1,000-year-old ginseng. I'll settle it myself." At this point, Zhang Meng paused before continuing, "Sect Master Sun, I know you may not believe in this skill of mine, but I can use it once in advance to let you see it before making a decision. What do you think?" When Sun Qiao heard this, she was shocked. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, "Prince Zhang, let's just forget about it. Using this skill consumes so much energy every time. It's too wasteful. I think we should just forget about it." Although Sun Qiao said that this matter was over, Zhang Meng could clearly see the anticipation in her eyes. He couldn't blame Sun Qiao for being suspicious. No matter who it was, they would be suspicious. Needless to say, Sun Qiao had never heard of such a magical skill. Even Zhang Meng had never heard of it. This skill was just something that Zhang Meng casually said. His purpose was naturally to let Sun Qiao know that Zhang Meng would pay a huge price to help them. As long as Sun Qiao was grateful to Zhang Meng, she would definitely listen to him and go to Twin Bull Mountain with him. And this was Zhang Meng's ultimate goal. Seeing that Sun Qiao didn't believe him, Zhang Meng could only smile and say, "Sect Master Sun, you don't have to worry about me. I've been practicing this skill for many years. Now I can already master the technique of using it. If it's just a simple use, it won't consume much of my lifespan. It'll only consume a few months of my lifespan. When the time comes, I just need to eat some simple elixirs and it will naturally be replenished. So, Sect Master Sun, don't worry. I'll be fine." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiao was immediately overjoyed. She quickly asked, "Prince Zhang, if you want to test it, how do you want to test it?" Hearing Sun Qiao's question, Zhang Meng shook his head and said with a smile, "I don't know how you and the Tiangongmen compete. You just have to test it according to the competition method at that time." Speaking up to this point, Zhang Meng's tone paused for a moment before he continued. "Just like what you said just now, if you're competing with the Heavens Craftsman sect in terms of defense power, can't we just test the defense power of your equipment?" As a manufacturer of equipment, Kikyaman naturally had a complete set of equipment to test defense. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiao immediately stood up and said to Zhang Meng, "Okay, then let's go test it now." Hearing this, Zhang Meng also stood up and said indifferently, "Okay, then let's go test it now." Seeing this, Sun Qiao immediately walked towards the door impatiently. After exiting the door, Sun Qiao called for another disciple and asked him to go and prepare. Then, she turned her head and said to Zhang Meng, "Prince Zhang, let's go." The three of them exited the guest hall and walked towards the south of the courtyard. There was a separate courtyard in the south of the courtyard. This was the place where equipment was made. Pushing open the door of this small courtyard, there was a two-story building in front of them. Sun Qiao led Zhang Meng and Ling Yelyo to the door of this two-story building. After opening the door, she led Zhang Meng and Ling Yelyo in. The three of them came to a room at the end of the corridor. Sun Qiao then turned her head to look at Zhang Meng and explained, "Prince Zhang, this is the place where we test our equipment." As she spoke, Sun Qiao had already pushed open the door and walked in. Zhang Meng walked into the room and saw more than 10 weapons hanging on the wall opposite the door. In the middle of the room, there was a slightly larger wooden platform. At this moment, the disciple that Sun Qiao instructed earlier walked in with a piece of leather armor. Sun Qiao instructed the disciple to place the leather armor on the wooden platform and asked him to leave. Then, she turned her head to look at Zhang Meng and said, It's actually very simple to test the defense of our equipment. As she spoke, Sun Xiao pointed at the weapons on the wall and explained. The weapons on the wall are all hung in order. The leftmost saber is made of ordinary iron. If the leather armor can withstand the saber's slash, it will pass the most basic test. Speaking of this, Sun Xiao pointed to the rest of the weapons and said, the rest of the weapons, from left to right, are all arranged according to the quality of the materials. The one on the far right is the best weapon. Speaking of this, Sun Xiao paused for a moment before continuing. Actually, according to the defense of the leather armor, as long as it can withstand the slash of the second sword, it will be considered a qualified leather armor. Chapter 340. Ling Yelyo pointed at the weapons on the wall and continued to explain. Even if it's a good leather armor, it can only withstand the third weapon's attack. If it can withstand the fourth weapon's attack, then it can be considered the best leather armor. Speaking up to this point, Sun Xiao pointed at the leather armor on the wooden platform and said with a smile, this leather armor is actually a failed leather armor. It doesn't have any defensive power, and it can't even withstand the first blade. Sun Xiao turned her head to look at Zhang Meng and asked solemnly, Prince Zhang, if you use your skill on this leather armor, how high would its defensive power be? How many blades would it be able to withstand? Zhang Meng looked at the leather armor on the wooden platform. This leather armor was indeed, as Sun Xiao said, a failed leather armor. On the leather armor there were a few holes left. It was probably a failed product. Zhang Meng casually glanced at the leather armor, then turned his head to look at Sun Xiao and asked with a smile. Sect leader Sun, I've already said that this skill of mine can be adjusted. If I want to use it to its full potential, it will take 3 years of my life. If it's the simplest skill, it might only take a few days of my life. Speaking up to this point, Zhang Meng looked at the weapons on the wall and said with a smile, there are a total of 10 weapons on the wall. How about this? I'll use half of my power to make this leather armor withstand the sixth blade's attack. Sect leader Sun, what do you think? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiao was shocked and quickly asked, really? Can you really make this leather armor withstand the sixth blade's attack? Zhang Meng casually nodded, no problem. Sun Xiao took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She gently nodded. Then, Prince Zhang, please use your skill. After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Zhang Meng immediately raised his hands and waved them in front of his eyes. At the same time, he muttered something. After a while, he pointed at the leather armor. Okay, sect leader Sun, you can test it now. Sun Xiao widened her eyes and looked at Zhang Meng. She asked in confusion, Prince Zhang, is this enough? After hearing Sun Xiao's words, Zhang Meng asked in confusion, is there something wrong? Sun Xiao wiped the cold sweat on her forehead and said softly, such a magical skill, shouldn't there be some kind of phenomenon? For example, a bright golden light or something. Hearing this, Zhang Meng shook his head with a wry smile. Sect leader Sun, there's no need for those fake things. Hurry up and test it. If the time passes, I'm afraid my skill will be wasted. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiao was shocked. She hurriedly asked someone to take the sixth blade from the wall. When the disciple was about to use this blade to cut the leather armor, he was stopped by Sun Xiao. Give me the blade, I'll do the test myself. Taking the blade from the disciple, Sun Xiao walked to the front of the leather armor and turned to look at Zhang Meng. Is this really okay? Zhang Meng nodded and said confidently, no problem, sect leader Sun, please do your test. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiao raised the long blade, widened her eyes, and slashed at the leather armor. The saber slashed down and hit the leather armor on the stage. Sun Quainer believed that with the sharpness of the sixth blade, it wouldn't be difficult to cut the leather armor in half. After so many years, Sun Xiao had only used the fourth saber from the left. She had never touched any of the other sabers that were hung on the wall. Because of the defense of leather armor, unless it was made of super strong materials, it was considered a good leather armor if it could withstand the attack of the fourth blade. Currently, Sun Xiao was holding the sixth saber. According to the order on the wall, each saber was equivalent to a level 6 weapon. If the leather armor could withstand this attack, it meant that the defense of the leather armor had reached level 6. It could be said that Sun Xiao had never seen a leather armor with level 6 defense. Ling Yelyo was so nervous that he held his breath. He stared at the leather armor on the stage and didn't even dare to blink. The blade in Sun Xiao's hand hit the leather armor. The expected scene of the sword being cut in half didn't occur. Instead, the sword was blocked by the leather armor, and the sword couldn't go any further. Sun Xiao's eyes were wide open as she stared blankly at the scene. After a moment, she kept her blade, raised it high and slashed down again. This time, Sun Xiao raised her hand higher and used more strength. She almost used up all the strength in her body. Unfortunately, the long saber in her hand once again slashed at the leather armor. Just like before, it was blocked by the failed leather armor. Seeing that the leather armor blocked the second attack, Ling Yelyo couldn't hold it in anymore. He went forward and held Sun Xiao's hand and shouted, "Mother, it's really good. This leather armor really blocked the sixth blade. We succeeded." After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Sun Xiao slowly kept her blade and passed it to the disciple who was waiting at the side. She then turned to look at Zhang Meng with a face full of disbelief. "Prince Zhang, you really did it. How did you do it?" Zhang Meng heard and laughed in his heart. The truth was definitely not to be told to them. "Sect leader's son, how was my skill? It didn't disappoint you, right?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiao nodded and said with some emotion, "I didn't expect Prince Zhang to have such a powerful skill. I really didn't expect it." Zhang Meng heard and waved his hand. "Actually, this skill isn't very useful. It can only be maintained for a short period of time. After a long time, the effect on the leather armor will disappear, and it will return to its original state." "I see." Sun Xiao shook her head in disappointment. "What a pity. It would be great if this effect could be maintained for a long time." After hearing Sun Xiao's sigh, Zhang Meng hurriedly waved his hand. "That's not important. Although the effect on the leather armor only lasted for a short period of time, I think that during this period of time, we should be able to win the competition. Sect leader's son, don't you think this makes sense?" After hearing this, Sun Xiao nodded and said with a sigh, "If this effect can be maintained for a long time, then..." Before Sun Xiao could finish her words, Ling Yelyo interrupted her from the side. "Mother, didn't you tell me that people shouldn't be greedy? As long as we can win this competition, it's better than anything else." After hearing this, Sun Xiao turned her head and stroked Ling Yelyo's hair. She smiled and said, "This child is starting to teach his mother a lesson." After saying this, Sun Xiao paused for a moment before continuing. "That's right. As long as we can win this competition, that's enough." Chapter 341. After testing the defensive capabilities of the leather armor, the three of them returned to the living room. After Sun Xiao asked for tea to be served, she turned her head to look at Zhang Meng and asked with a smile, "Prince Zhang, we've really troubled you this time. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't have kept this competition a secret from you. We would have definitely lost." Zhang Meng heard this and shook his head. "It's all right, it's nothing. Moreover, I'll have to rely on sect leader's son in the future." At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing. "I hope sect leader's son won't tell anyone about the fact that I can buff the leather armor. If the other party is on guard, I'm afraid it will be disadvantageous to us." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiao nodded. "Of course, only the three of us know about this. There won't be a fourth person who knows." At this point, Sun Xiao pondered for a moment before continuing to ask, "Oh right, I heard Prince Zhang say that you want us to go to Mt. Shuangniu with you? Zhang Meng heard this and nodded. That's indeed the case. I originally wanted to ask sect leader Sun to send someone to make the black feather cloak for me. Now that I see Kikyaman here, it's indeed inappropriate. Even if you win this competition, it's hard to guarantee that Tianwu won't cause trouble for you in the future. Since that's the case, why don't you just move to my Mt. Shuangniu? Firstly, you can make equipment for me. Secondly, as long as you go to Mt. Shuangniu, I can guarantee that the Tiangongmen won't dare to cause trouble for you. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiaoer asked doubtfully, Prince Zhang, the Tiangongmen are very strong. Not only are their crafting skills outstanding, but they are also very skilled in martial arts. Furthermore, they have the numbers advantage. Aren't you afraid that we'll be in danger if we go to Mt. Shuangniu? After listening to Sun Qiaoer's words, Zhang Meng shook his head. Sect leader Sun, don't worry. As long as I dare to let you go, I won't be afraid of anyone finding trouble with me. When Sun Qiaoer heard this, she probed, Prince Zhang, what if the Tiangongmen really don't let us off and go to Mount Shuangniu to cause trouble for us? Do you really have a way to deal with them? After hearing Sun Qiaoer's words, Zhang Meng sneered. If the Tiangongmen want to go, then stay here obediently. If they don't know what's good for them, then I don't mind playing with them. Seeing that Zhang Meng said it so easily, Sun Qiaoer was a little relieved. She wanted to ask about this matter clearly, but she also knew that every sect had its own secret. If she asked again, she would be suspected of prying into other people's secrets. Doing so would not be good. Thinking up to this point, Sun Qiaoer asked again, Prince Zhang, if we really go to Mount Twin Bulls, what kind of equipment do you have for us to craft? Speaking up to this point, Sun Qiaoer paused for a moment before continuing. Prince Zhang, you also know that although there aren't many people in Kikyaman, if we don't have equipment to craft, it will be difficult for us to sustain ourselves. Although Sun Qiaoer did not say it clearly, Zhang Meng already understood. Sect leader Sun, you don't have to worry about this. If you go to Mount Twin Bulls, I think you can split into two groups. One group will craft high-grade equipment, and the other group will find some ordinary people to craft ordinary equipment. Speaking up to this point, Zhang Meng pondered for a moment before continuing. To be honest, I want to build an auction house in Mount Twin Bulls. When the time comes, the equipment that you craft, the high-grade equipment, will be auctioned off in the auction house. When the time comes, I can guarantee that Kikyaman's expenses will not be a problem. Auction house? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Qiaoer exclaimed, Prince Zhang, don't tell me you want to open an auction house. Zhang Meng nodded. Indeed. My plan is to gradually build Mount Twin Bulls into the largest auction house. Everyone who wants to buy high-grade equipment will come here to buy equipment. Speaking up to this point, Zhang Meng smiled and continued, in order to build this auction house, I have already gone to the southern county branch of the Tianji sect and asked branch leader Sun's third disciple, Zhang Leji, to be my permanent consultant. In the future, he will supervise the construction of this auction house. Zhang Leji? Hearing this, Sun Qiaoer was shocked again. The southern county branch of the Tianji sect was very famous in the southern county. Branch leader Sun Xinjing's 8 disciples, other than the 6 to 8 disciples who had just joined, were all people with superb skills. It was already very good to be able to invite one person, but Prince Zhang actually asked the Tianji sect's third disciple to be his permanent consultant. This was really too unbelievable. Sun Qiaoer composed herself and asked tentatively, could it be that Zhang Leji is really willing to go to Mount Twin Bulls with you? Zhang Meng nodded. He has already agreed. Now, he is rushing to Mount Twin Bulls with the 4 Tijingangs that Sun Xinjing gave me. Tijingangs? Sun Qiaoer exclaimed again. Could it be that branch leader Sun gave you the Tijingangs? Then, before Zhang Meng could answer, Sun Qiaoer muttered to herself, that's impossible. The 8 Tijingangs of the Tianji sect's Southern County branch are the treasures of the sect. Even Sun Xinjing doesn't have the authority to give them away. Zhang Meng nodded when he heard this. Sect leader Sun is right. These 4 Tijingangs were indeed not given to me by Old Man Sunday. They were lent to me. Sun Xiao sighed when she heard this. The Southern County branch of the Tianji sect has countless secrets. For so many years, no one dared to have any ideas about the Southern County branch. This is all because the Southern County branch has 8 Tijingangs guarding it, so no one dared to have any ideas about these secrets. I didn't expect sect leader Sun to be willing to lend you 4 Tijingangs. This is really a huge favor. Zhang Meng shook his head. Sect leader Sun, actually, the Tianji sect took advantage of me in this matter. Sun Xiao suddenly turned her head to look at Zhang Meng and asked in confusion, Prince Zhang, the Southern County branch lent you such an important thing. How did it become taking advantage of you? Zhang Meng stretched out 2 fingers and sighed. Old Man Sun used these 4 Tijingangs to exchange for 2 of my conditions. Didn't they take advantage of me? When Sun Xiao heard this, she looked at Zhang Meng in shock. She could not understand why he had only agreed to 2 conditions of the Southern County branch in exchange for 4 Tijingangs. How did it become taking advantage of him? Ling Yelyo, who was at the side, also shook Sun Xiao's arm and asked in surprise, Mother, I heard that the Tianji sect is very powerful. Almost every county has their branch. Are they very powerful? Sun Xiao nodded when she heard this. Basically, all the important places in Anwu country have mechanisms made by the Tianji sect. It can be said that the Tianji sect is the sect with the highest attainments in mechanism skills in Anwu country. The strength of the Tianji sect is almost the same as the Tiangongmen. The only difference is that the Tiangongmen make the equipment, while the Tianji sect makes the mechanisms. Chapter 342. Looking at Zhang Meng, who was smiling without saying a word, Sun Xiao suddenly hesitated for a moment and asked, Prince Zhang, if you ask us to move to Mount Shuangniu, will we still be Kikyamen in the future? Sun Xiao did not think about this question at first because she did not think that it would be of any help to her. However, after the test just now, Sun Xiao's heart was filled with confidence for this competition. Since they had a chance to win this competition, they had to face the next problem. The ultimate goal of this competition with the Tiangongmen was to make Kikyamen surrender and join the Tiangongmen. If that was the case, Kikyamen's name would naturally disappear from the pugilistic world. In the future, there would be no Kikyamen's name, only the Tiangongmen's name. The reason why Sun Xiao refused to join the Tiangongmen was naturally because she did not want Kikyamen's name to disappear from the pugilistic world. However, if Zhang Meng won this competition for them, they would not have to join the Tiangongmen. However, Prince Zhang wanted them to move to Mount Shuangniu, which was Prince Zhang's territory. If they were not allowed to use Kikyamen's name by then, in Sun Xiao's eyes, even if Prince Zhang won this competition for them, it would be meaningless. This was because Sun Xiao insisted that she did not want Kikyamen's name to disappear from the pugilistic world. After asking this question, Sun Xiao looked at Zhang Meng nervously. She wanted to hear his thoughts. When he heard Sun Xiao's question, Zhang Meng smiled and waved his hand. Chief Sun, you've misunderstood. Even if I let you join Mount Shuangniu, the name Kikyamen will not disappear. At this point, Zhang Meng paused for a moment before continuing, What I'm thinking is that Mount Shuangniu will become bigger and bigger in the future. When that time comes, Kikyamen won't be the only sect in Mount Shuangniu. There will be many other sects developing in Mount Shuangniu. It's like everyone moving to a city. Just staying in the city won't change anything. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiao frowned and asked in confusion, Prince Zhang, what's the point of doing this? Zhang Meng smiled and said, Actually, if you all move to Mount Shuangniu right now, it will definitely be the wisest choice. This is because Mount Shuangniu is still in its development stage. Those who move there first will naturally have a certain advantage. As for me, turning Mount Shuangniu into the biggest auction house is what I want to do the most. Zhang Meng said this, but he did not actually say what he really wanted to say. His true meaning was to find a way out for the people of Mount Shuangniu. He would never allow his brothers and sisters of Mount Shuangniu to bare their teeth and brandish their weapons to rob others. He would never allow such a thing to happen. Sun Qiao was overjoyed when she heard Zhang Meng's answer. If Prince Zhang was telling the truth, then it would definitely be an opportunity for Kikiaman. Looking at the backs of Ling Yelyo and Zhang Meng leaving, Sun Qiao was very happy. She did not expect that the competition that had made her feel despair would be so miraculously resolved. At this moment, Han Guyun, who had just left the hall, suddenly walked in from the main door. "Master, you haven't rested yet?" Sun Qiao nodded and pointed to the chair next to her. She smiled and said, "Sit down and talk. What's the matter?" After Han Guyun sat down, she asked softly, "Master, are you still upset about the competition?" Sun Qiao shook her head when she heard this. "It's fine." Sun Qiao turned to look at Han Guyun and said, "By the way, do you still have that wild bear skin?" Han Guyun nodded. "Yes, it's still in the warehouse." "Master, do you want to use it?" Sun Qiao nodded. "Take out the wild bear skin tomorrow. We'll use it to make equipment for the competition." After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Han Guyun frowned. "Master, even if we have the wild bear skin, it's useless?" Sun Qiao waved her hand. "You don't have to worry about this. I know what to do. By the way, how much wild silk do we have in the warehouse? I want to use wild silk to connect the seams of this wild bear skin." When Han Guyun heard this, a trace of embarrassment appeared on her face. "Master, we don't have much wild silk to begin with, but during this period of time, we can't buy wild silk. I don't know what's going on." After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Qiao couldn't help but frown. "Have you checked all the shops in the South County City?" Han Guyun nodded. "This disciple has been going to the shop for the past few days, but I haven't been able to find wild silk." At this point, Han Guyun also frowned. "Master, I've always felt that it was very strange. Today, I asked and found out that the wild silk in their inventory had been bought out as early as 10 days ago." After saying this, Han Guyun turned her head to look at Sun Qiao and asked tentatively, "Master, who would buy these natural silkworms? Could they be from the Heaven's Craftsman faction?" After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Qiao pondered for a moment before nodding. "It's very likely that the Tiangongmen bought all the materials we needed in advance in order to win this competition." At this point, Sun Qiao sighed and continued, "Today, Lil Lu went to buy a diamond monster's skin. Li Jin from the west of the city hunted a diamond monster, but the people from the Heaven's Craftsman faction bought it first. I think they were afraid that we would win this competition and wanted to be foolproof, so they bought all the materials we needed in advance." When Han Guyun heard this, her expression suddenly changed and she hurriedly asked, "Master, if these things were really done by the Tiangongmen, then what should we do?" Sun Qiao sneered. "What else can we do? The Tiangongmen are very powerful. Even if we want to compete with them, I'm afraid it will be very difficult." At this point, Sun Qiao's tone paused before she continued. "Xiao Yun, in the next period of time, you will still lead people to look for these materials. Remember, even if the Tiangongmen bought all these materials, you should not have a conflict with them. Just go to the shop every day to inquire about the news." After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Han Guyun was a little anxious. "Master, if this is the case, and the Tiangongmen bought all the materials, then what should we do? Are we going to admit defeat just like that?" After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Qiao waved her hand and sneered. "Xiao Yun, you don't have to worry about this matter. I have my own plans. You just need to go to the city every day to buy the materials. As for whether you can buy them or not, don't force it. Chapter 343. After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Han Guyun became even more anxious. Master, if we don't have good materials, won't we lose without a doubt? Sun Qiao turned to look at Han Guyun and said with a smile, the Tiangongmen won't leave good materials for us. Even if we want to force them, I'm afraid we won't get any good materials. Since that's the case, we might as well not compete with them for those materials. Let them fight for them. Han Guyun hurriedly asked, Master, since that's the case, do we still need to go to the shops in the city? Sun Qiao smiled. Of course we have to go. At least we have to put on a show to make the Tiangongmen happy. After hearing Sun Qiao's words, Han Guyun's eyes suddenly lit up. She asked in surprise, Master, are you sure you can win this competition? Sun Qiao smiled and waved her hand. Xiao Yun, don't worry about this. I know what I'm doing. Seeing the joy on Sun Qiao's face, Han Guyun, who had been upset, seemed to calm down a lot. Suddenly, Han Guyun raised her head and said in a low voice, Master, disciple has something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. Sun Qiao glanced at Han Guyun and asked curiously, Why are you so nervous? What's the matter? Hearing Sun Qiao's question, Han Guyun gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, Master, disciple has noticed that there's something wrong with second junior sister these days. Sun Qiao heard this and asked doubtfully, Is there something wrong with Xiao Yu? Han Guyun nodded. During this time, disciple found out that second junior sister has been in contact with the Tiangongmen. After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Qiao's face suddenly changed. She asked, Is this true? Hearing Sun Qiao's question, Han Guyun hurriedly nodded. Master, this is absolutely true. Sun Qiao frowned and asked, How do you know? Han Guyun replied softly, Master, just 3 days ago, disciple saw second junior sister talking with a Tiangongmen disciple in a small alley in the west of the city. When Sun Qiao heard this, she quickly asked, Are you sure? Is that really Xiao Yu? Hearing this, Han Guyun hurriedly shook her head. Master, this disciple is absolutely not mistaken. That person is indeed second junior sister. After hearing Han Guyun's words, Sun Qiao secretly sighed in her heart. Although his eldest disciple, Han Guyun, was a woman, she had a straightforward temperament. She never hid anything in her heart. She would say whatever she wanted to say. She could be regarded as outspoken. The second disciple, An Hong Yu, had a completely different temperament from Han Guyun. And Hong Yu was introverted and didn't like to talk much, but most people like her had their own ideas. Seeing that her master didn't say anything, Han Guyun asked tentatively, Master, do you think second junior sister will? Before Han Guyun could finish her words, Sun Qiao waved her hand and interrupted her. All right, that's enough. Go and rest. Hearing this, Han Guyun could only stand up. After bowing to her master, she walked out of the door. Just as she reached the door, she heard her master's voice again from behind her. Xiao Yun, everything I just said, including Xiao Yu's matter, don't tell anyone. Remember? Hearing Sun Qiao's words, Han Guyun hurriedly turned around and responded, then left the living room. As soon as Han Guyun left the living room, Sun Qiao's face showed a trace of pain. Anyone who knew that their disciple wanted to betray them would definitely feel bad in their heart. Leng Yelyo left the living room with Zhang Meng and went straight to the guest room in the side courtyard. In the corner of the courtyard, there was a room specially prepared for guests. As soon as the two entered the room, Leng Yelyo hurriedly closed the door and turned to look at Zhang Meng and asked, Zhang de Go, who taught you that skill? Looking at the curious Leng Yelyo, Zhang Meng pretended to be mysterious. Of course it was passed down from my ancestors. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Leng Yelyo rubbed her hands together and carefully asked, Zhang Degu, can you leave it to me? At this point, Ling Yelyo didn't wait for Zhang Meng's reply. An inexplicable glint appeared in his eyes. If I can learn this skill, I'll be too powerful. At that time, I'll definitely use this skill to help my mother deal with the hateful Heaven's Craftsman faction. After saying this, Ling Yelyo lowered her head and looked at Zhang Meng, saying excitedly, Zhang Degu, if you do that, my mother will definitely be very happy, right? Ling Yelyo's pretty little face was already flushed red from excitement. Seeing this, Zhang Meng sighed. I don't know if your mother is happy or not, but you will definitely be unhappy. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo's eyes suddenly widened and she asked in confusion, Why? Why would I be unhappy? Hearing this, Zhang Meng first found a chair and sat down, then said indifferently, Think about it, every time you use it, you will consume 3 years of your lifespan. If you use it carelessly, then very soon, your hair will be white, your face will be full of wrinkles, and you will become an old woman. At that time, will you be happy? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo subconsciously covered her face and asked in a deep voice, Really, really? Will I really have a head full of white hair, a face full of wrinkles, and become an old woman? Seeing Ling Yelyo's nervous expression, Zhang Meng laughed in his heart, but said with a serious expression, I've already said that every time you use it, you will consume 3 years of your lifespan. If you use it too many times, you will definitely become an old woman. Is there a problem with that? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo hurriedly took a few steps back and distanced herself from Zhang Meng, as if being close to Zhang Meng would also make her become an old woman. Seeing Ling Yelyo's pale face due to nervousness, Zhang Meng asked again, How is it? Do you still want to learn? Hearing this, Ling Yelyo widened her eyes and stared at Zhang Meng. After a long while, she suddenly nodded again and asked tentatively, If I use it less often, will I not become like that? Hearing Ling Yelyo's trembling voice, Zhang Meng said calmly, That's true. Let me calculate. You're 18 years old this year, so how many times can you use it? After using it once, you'll become 21 years old. After using it twice, you'll become 24 years old. Using it. Stop talking. Before Zhang Meng could finish, he was interrupted by Ling Yelyo. Zhang Degu, I beg you, stop talking. I'm scared. Hearing this, Zhang Meng couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed out loud. Since you know, do you still want to learn? Hearing Zhang Meng's question, Ling Yelyo couldn't help but frown. The expression on her face began to change. Gradually, tears appeared in her eyes and this layer of mist became thicker and thicker. In the end, it condensed into tears and fell from her eyes. Chapter 344. Seeing Ling Yelyo's pitiful appearance, Zhang Meng could not bear it and quickly said, Don't worry. If you don't want to learn it, then don't. What's there to be sad about? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo wiped her tears and said angrily, I won't learn it. Why wouldn't I learn it? I must learn it. I must learn this skill and defeat the hateful Tiangongman for my mother. Zhang Meng asked curiously as he looked at Ling Yelyo, whose face was full of tears but whose eyes were filled with determination. Hey, are you stupid? Aren't you afraid of becoming an old woman? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo's tears flowed even more. She shook her head vigorously and said loudly, I'm afraid. I want to learn it too. My mother raised me and sacrificed so much. Now that I've grown up, I want to help her. Zhang Meng asked tentatively, Even if you become an old woman, it's okay? Ling Yelyo nodded vigorously. Yes, as long as I can help my mother, I'm willing to become an old woman. Zhang Meng asked again, You won't regret it? Hearing Zhang Meng's question, Ling Yelyo couldn't hold it in anymore. She covered her face with both hands and burst into tears. Ling Yelyo shook her head vigorously as she cried. She choked and said, I don't regret it. I really don't regret it. I won't regret it. Sob sob. Looking at Ling Yelyo, who was crying so hard, Zhang Meng stood up and walked to her side. He patted her shoulder and said with a smile, "Miss Ling, you don't have to worry about this. What you think won't happen." As soon as Zhang Meng finished speaking, Ling Yelyo's crying stopped abruptly. She looked up at Zhang Meng and asked in surprise, "Zhang Degu, are you saying that even if I use this skill, I won't become an old woman?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "As long as I don't teach you, you won't become an old woman." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo was stunned for a moment before he angrily said, "Why can't you teach me?" Zhang Meng sighed. "Miss Ling, have you forgotten what I just said? This is our family's ancestral skill." At this point, Zhang Meng turned to look at Ling Yelyo and asked, "Hey, do you know what an ancestral skill is?" Hearing Zhang Meng's question, Ling Yelyo shook his head. Closely after that, he nodded, "I see. My family also has a unique skill passed down from our ancestors. I heard from my mom that she would impart her unique skill to me." When Zhang Meng heard this, he nodded and asked with a smile, "Miss Ling, in that case, will your mother pass on your family's unique skill to outsiders?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo was stunned again and muttered to herself, "Although most of the unique skills can be passed on to eldest senior sister and second senior sister, my mother also said that there is a unique skill that can only be passed on to me and not to outsiders." After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng suddenly clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Do you understand now?" Hearing this, Ling Yelyo shook her head and looked at Zhang Meng in confusion. "I don't understand." Seeing this, Zhang Meng sighed, "Why don't you understand? An ancestral skill can only be passed down to one's own family. Outsiders definitely can't learn it. Otherwise, why would it be called an ancestral skill?" At this point, Zhang Meng patted Ling Yelyo's shoulder and asked with a smile, "Do you understand now?" Ling Yelyo nodded, "I understand." Seeing that Ling Yelyo understood, Zhang Meng heaved a sigh of relief and clapped his hands. "Since you understand, you naturally understand why you can't become an old woman." Ling Yelyo nodded and said hesitantly, But I want to learn." Hearing this, Zhang Meng flatly refused. An ancestral skill can only be passed down to one's own family. It can't be passed down to outsiders. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo frowned and stood there in a pitiful daze for a long time. Then, she suddenly raised her hand and grabbed Zhang Meng's arm, shook it coquettishly, and said in a coquettish voice, "But, I really want to learn. I beg you, Zhang Degu, teach me this decision." After saying this, Ling Yelyo saw that Zhang Meng didn't say anything. She grabbed Zhang Meng's arm again and shook it a few times, and said pitifully, "Zhang Degu, at most, I'll repay you in the future. What do you think?" After hearing Ling Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng's heart skipped a beat. He smiled and asked, "Miss Ling, how are you going to repay me in the future?" Hearing this, Ling Yelyo frowned and blinked her big eyes, then said, How about this? I'll make a good equipment for you in the future. What do you think?" Hearing this, Zhang Meng shook his head in disappointment. "No, my family's ancestral skill is so powerful. If I only exchange it for a piece of equipment, wouldn't I lose out? No, definitely not." Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo frowned again and thought for a while before saying again, "If that's the case, 2 pieces of equipment. What do you think? I beg you, Zhang Degu, just give it to me." Hearing this, Zhang Meng was even more disappointed. According to this progress, Ling Yelyo might say something like 10 pieces of equipment in the end. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, "Miss Ling, let's not talk about the equipment. I'm not bragging, but I can get as many pieces of equipment as I want. You don't have to exchange with me." Saying this, Zhang Meng turned to look at Ling Yelyo and blinked. "If you want to learn, you'd better find another way to repay me. Do you understand?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo's frown deepened. It was almost like a fried dough twist. "Zhang Degu, but I really can't think of any other way. Other than the equipment, what else can I repay you with? Saying this, Ling Yelyo's eyes suddenly lit up. She smiled and said, Zhang Degu, do you want me to use spiritual herbs to exchange with you? The moment Ling Yelyo's eyes lit up, Zhang Meng really thought that she was enlightened. He didn't expect her to still be so insensible. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng felt a little bored. He clapped his hands and shook off Ling Yelyo's hand. Miss Ling, since you're not sincere with me, let's not talk about this. As he spoke, Zhang Meng had already turned around and said with a smile, Aya, the weather today is so good. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo looked at the dark night sky outside the window with some confusion. She didn't understand how he could tell that the weather outside was good. Zhang Meng returned to his seat and looked at Ling Yelyo, who was standing there motionlessly. He asked curiously, Miss Ling, don't you need to sleep? After hearing Zhang Meng's question, Ling Yelyo reacted and rolled her eyes at Zhang Meng. You don't need to sleep. Zhang Meng asked curiously, since you also need to sleep, why don't you go back and sleep? Why are you still standing there without moving? Chapter 345. Ling Yelyo quickly walked in front of Zhang Meng and whispered, Zhang Degu, please give this skill to me. I'm begging you. Zhang Meng shook his head when he heard this. Miss Ling, I've already said that this is my ancestral skill. It's impossible for me to pass it on to outsiders. Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo was stunned. Then, she grabbed Zhang Meng's arm and shook it vigorously. She muttered, Zhang Degu, then tell me, how can you pass it on to me? Zhang Meng thought for a moment and suddenly laughed. He turned to look at Ling Yelyo and said seriously, the rules of the family cannot be changed. If you want to learn, you can't be an outsider. At this point, Zhang Meng looked at Ling Yelyo and blinked. Do you understand? Ling Yelyo shook her head and said doubtfully, I don't understand. When Zhang Meng heard this, he was speechless. He took a deep breath and said slowly, You're an outsider now. Do you understand? Ling Yelyo nodded and said dejectedly, I know. After hearing Ling Yelyo's answer, Zhang Meng suddenly clapped his hands. That's it. You just have to think of a way to become not an outsider. Isn't that enough? Hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo blinked in confusion and asked tentatively, Can an outsider become not an outsider? After hearing Ling Yelyo's question, Zhang Meng secretly smiled and said seriously, That's right. As long as you become a member of our family, you'll be one of us. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo suddenly came to a realization. She clapped her hands and said happily, I understand. As long as you become my big brother, we'll be family, right? Looking at the inexplicably excited Ling Yelyo, Zhang Meng secretly sighed and said slowly, Miss Ling, this is not the only way to become one of us. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo frowned and asked doubtfully, Is there any other way? Zhang Meng blushed when he heard that. He stammered, Well, that's all for today. Go back and think about how you can become one of us. Let's talk about this in detail tomorrow. Hearing that, Ling Yelyo pouted, No, I want to learn it today. Seeing that Ling Yelyo was about to act coquettishly, Zhang Meng was helpless and could only push her out of the room. Back in his room, Zhang Meng sat in front of the table. He had been busy for the past few days. He had to think about his plan for the auction house, so he didn't have the time. Taking advantage of this time, Zhang Meng prepared to think about his auction house plan. In the past, Zhang Meng's plan was to build an auction house. Then, he would put the good things he hunted in the auction house to be auctioned. But now, it seemed that he hadn't thought it through. There were still many details that he hadn't thought through clearly. For example, an auction house couldn't only auction top-quality items. There had to be some matching items. If his auction house only auctioned items at sky-high prices and only auctioned 1 or 2 items at each auction, it would be too dangerous. Therefore, there had to be some mid to high quality items. Even mid to high quality items weren't easy to obtain. Take the black feather cloak for example. Even if Meng Jing found the feather of the Eagle of Nightmares, he still wouldn't be able to get the black feather cloak if no one made it for him. However, as long as Kikyaman was willing to move over, these things would be much simpler. Zhang Meng only needed to bring the feather of the Eagle of Nightmares back. Kikyaman's people would naturally make the black feather cloak from the Eagle of Nightmares. Then, the finished black feather cloak could be auctioned in the auction house. If there weren't people from Kikyaman, then Zhang Meng would be responsible for sending the feather of the Eagle of Nightmares to a certain place and asking someone to make it for him. This kind of thing sounded simple, but it was actually very troublesome to implement. First of all, even if you sent the black feather cloak, the other person might not have the time to make it for you. Also, there was the problem of sending it. If the item sent was very precious, then the safety of the people on the road would be a big problem. If there were too many things, Zhang Meng wouldn't be able to handle it alone. Therefore, sometimes when it came to things like rhyming, Zhang Meng didn't need to appear. If Zhang Meng didn't appear, then the safety would definitely be a lot weaker. If the item was lost, then wouldn't it be a waste of effort? If other people were to send the materials over, then they would have to wait there and wait for the equipment to be made before sending it over, then it was very likely that the equipment would be lost. Therefore, no matter how good the items outside were, it wouldn't be as convenient as making them in Twin Bull Mountain. In terms of the construction of the auction house, as long as Zhang Leji was there, Zhang Meng believed that his auction house would definitely be made into an impenetrable fortress. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to break in if they wanted to. Most importantly, there was a trap master watching from the side. Even if they found something wrong, they could immediately fix it and upgrade the unsafe trap. In terms of making equipment, if Kikyaman agreed to return to Twin Bull Mountain with him, then when it came to making leather armor, he would have a guarantee and wouldn't have any worries. However, Kikyaman alone definitely wouldn't be able to support an auction house because they only knew how to make leather armor and not other equipment. If he wanted the auction house to have enough craftsmen, then he needed more people to come to Twin Bull Mountain. For example, the Tiangongmen who were going to compete with Kikyaman were definitely a good choice. Of course, Zhang Meng had never thought of asking the Heaven's Craftsman faction to move to MT Twin Oxen. That was unrealistic. He could only find 1 or 2 equipment crafting experts to move to MT Twin Oxen. There were also alchemy and swordsmithing experts. In short, the more people there were, the more convenient it would be for Zhang Meng. There shouldn't be any problems with Kikyaman now. With Sun Xiaoer's personality, Zhang Meng believed that as long as he helped her win the competition, it shouldn't be a problem for her to move to Twin Bull Mountain. After all, Sun Xiaoer had already promised Zhang Meng that as long as she won the competition, she would be able to move to Twin Bull Mountain with Zhang Meng. Since Kikyaman was fine, then it was the Tiangongmen's problem. However, he wasn't familiar with the Tiangongmen, so how would he know? Who knew how powerful their equipment was? If he wanted to find an expert craftsman, then he had to find a real expert. This was because the materials that Zhang Meng prepared were definitely the most precious materials in the world. If ordinary people were to make them, it would be a waste. This was also the result that Zhang Meng didn't want to see. Everything was limited, especially some things that were unique. It would be a pity if someone failed to make them. Chapter 346. Zhang Meng was not familiar with the Tiangongmen, so he naturally had no way of knowing whose skills were superb. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng planned to ask Sun Xiaoer tomorrow to see if it was possible to bring the Tiangongmen back. As for whether the Tiangongmen would take revenge on him if he poached the Tiangongmen, Zhang Meng had never thought about it. If he was afraid of the Tiangongmen taking revenge, Zhang Meng would not have done this. The next day, Zhang Meng was woken up by a series of intense knocks on the door before he could get out of bed. Zhang Meng got out of bed and opened the door, only to find that the person knocking on the door was Ling Yelyo. The moment Zhang Meng opened the door, Ling Yelyo could not wait to enter the room. "Hey, I thought about it all night yesterday, and I finally figured it out." Zhang Meng didn't expect that the girl was still thinking about this matter until now. "What did you think of?" Hearing this, Ling Yelyo moved closer to Zhang Meng and whispered, "Do you want me to be your disciple before you teach me this move?" Zhang Meng turned to look at Ling Yelyo in shock and asked doubtfully, "Is this the answer you came up with after thinking about it all night?" Hearing this, Ling Yelyo hurriedly nodded. "Am I right?" After listening to Ling Yelyo for a while, Zhang Meng sighed and said seriously, "Child, you're still young. Don't think about these troublesome things. Let's hurry up and eat." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo, who was originally full of joy, suddenly looked dejected again. "Could it be that I guessed wrong again?" Zhang Meng ignored her and pushed the door open to walk out. After thinking for a while, he stepped back and looked at Ling Yelyo. Just as he was about to speak, Ling Yelyo spoke first with a smile. "You agreed to my request?" Zhang Meng smiled bitterly and waved his hand. "Agreed to your head. I want to ask you, where are we going to eat?" After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Ling Yelyo's little mouth suddenly pouted. She muttered as she walked outside, "You only know how to eat, don't you know how to teach me?" Zhang Meng pretended not to hear Ling Yelyo's complaints. The two of them left the courtyard of the guest room and quickly arrived at the dining room. Before they finished their breakfast, Sun Xiaoer sent someone to look for Zhang Meng and asked him to meet her in the living room. After breakfast, Zhang Meng and Ling Yelyo walked towards the living room. The Sun Xiaoer were sons of the Sun Xiao Xiaoer were Xiaoer were Ling were Xiaoers paced back and forth in. When Sun Xiaoer saw Zhang Meng enter, she stopped and said with a smile, "I'll start making the equipment for this competition today. I wonder if Prince Zhang has any requirements for this equipment?" After hearing Sun Xiaoer's words, Zhang Meng shook his head. "Sect Master Sun, just make it. I don't have any requirements." At this point, Zhang Meng pondered for a while before continuing. "Sect Master Sun, you can make whatever equipment you want for the competition, but remember one thing. During the competition, you must let me sit at a place where I can see the equipment." After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Sun Xiaoer nodded. "No problem. Both of us will be present during the competition. It won't be a problem even if you're there." Hearing this, Zhang Meng nodded. "Then I have no problem with that." Sun Xiaoer pondered for a moment before turning to look at Ling Yelyo. She said softly, "This is Prince Zhang's first time in South County. There are still a few days before the competition. Take advantage of this gap and bring Prince Zhang around South County for a few days." When Ling Yelyo heard this, she was overjoyed and hurriedly nodded. "Okay." Originally, Ling Yelyo stayed here every day to make equipment. She had long been tired of doing such a boring job. Now that she heard that Sun Xiaoer had allowed her to play, Ling Yelyo was overjoyed. Before Zhang Meng could say anything, Ling Yelyo impatiently pulled Zhang Meng's hand and ran out of the door. "Mother, we're leaving." Looking at her daughter and Zhang Meng's backs, and then at their hands, Sun Xiaoer was about to stop them when her heart skipped a beat. Zhang Meng and Ling Yelyo walked out of Kikiaman's gate and headed toward South County City. After arriving at South County City, it didn't take long for Zhang Meng to realize something. Originally, Sun Xiaoer had asked Ling Yelyo to accompany her to play. However, it wasn't playing with her. It was clearly her who was accompanying Ling Yelyo to go shopping. The two of them first came to a silk shop. Ling Yelyo first compared each batch of cloth on her body and asked Zhang Meng to give her all kinds of suggestions. Seeing that this girl was extremely excited about a piece of blue cloth but did not say that she wanted to buy it, Zhang Meng had no choice but to buy this piece of cloth for her. It was not easy for them to leave the silk shop. In the blink of an eye, Leng Yelyo rushed into a rouge and powder shop. After entering the shop, all kinds of fragrances made Zhang Meng feel a little sleepy. In a daze, he could only see Leng Yelyo shuttling back and forth in all kinds of powder like a butterfly. In a daze, Zhang Meng only remembered that he had spent a lot of money and bought a lot of things. It was not easy for them to leave the rouge and powder shop and smell the fresh air. Zhang Meng had just felt a little awake when he suddenly realized that Leng Yelyo had already looked at a jewelry shop next to him. Seeing that Leng Yelyo had already rushed toward the jewelry shop, Zhang Meng did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly reached out to grab Leng Yelyo and said with a wry smile, "Where are you going?" Hearing Zhang Meng's question, Leng Yelyo suddenly turned his head and pointed at the jewelry store as he said anxiously, "Zhang de Gu, look. I heard that the jewelry in that jewelry shop is very beautiful. I wanted to go in the past, but my mother won't let me go. It's not easy for my mother to let me go today. Let's go in and take a look." After hearing Leng Yelyo's words, Zhang Meng shook his head and pointed to the sky. "Miss, you have to look carefully. It's already noon. Shouldn't we eat first before going to that jewelry shop?" Hearing this, Leng Yelyo quickly shook her head. "I'm not hungry. Let's go to that jewelry shop first and then eat, okay?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "No." Seeing this, Leng Yelyo quickly whispered, "It'll be soon. Let's go in and take a look. We'll be out soon. It won't be too late to eat then." Seeing Leng Yelyo lying to his face, Zhang Meng could only laugh bitterly in his heart. A rouge and powder shop and a silk shop had let them shop for the whole morning. If this was fast, Zhang Meng really did not know what was slow. Seeing that Leng Yelyo was about to say something else, Zhang Meng reached out and pulled her towards a nearby hotel. Leng Yelyo's face was filled with reluctance as she struggled with all her might. Unfortunately, no matter how hard she struggled, it was useless. She could only obediently follow Zhang Meng. The two of them pulled and entered the restaurant. Zhang Meng looked around, but Leng Yelyo, who was behind him, suddenly smiled and ran in front of him. Seeing this, Zhang Meng could not help but be stunned. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.